The silence in the auditorium was thick enough to touch, heavy with anticipation and judgment as Marcus Jefferson stood alone on the vast stage of Carnegie Hall. The 14-year-old boy's unseeing eyes stared forward, his fingers resting lightly on the polished wood of his cane. The grand piano loomed beside him like a sleeping beast. 9 feet of gleaming black lacquer that seemed to dwarf his slender frame. 4,000 pairs of eyes watched from the darkness beyond the stage lights, but Marcus couldn't see them. He could only feel their presence, their collective breath held in anticipation. The annual Young Virtuosos competition was the most prestigious piano competition for youth in the country. 20 gifted young pianists had been selected from thousands of applicants. Now only 3 remained for the final round, and Marcus was the last to perform. The winner would receive a full scholarship to Juilliard's pre-college program and the opportunity to play alongside Nikolai Volkov, the Russian piano virtuoso who had dominated classical music for the past decade. Volkov sat in the center of the judging panel, his expression impassive beneath a shock of silver hair. At 45, he had the bearing of royalty, shoulders square, chin lifted, eyes sharp as winter ice. His slender fingers, capable of both extraordinary tenderness and blistering technicality on the keys, now drummed impatiently on the table before him. "Mr. Jefferson," the competition host announced, her voice carrying across the hall, "you'll be performing Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor, followed by an original composition of your choice." Marcus nodded, his face betraying nothing as he carefully counted his steps toward the piano bench. The whispers had already begun in the audience. A blind competitor had never made it to the finals before. Some said it was a publicity stunt, others called it a sympathy vote. None of them knew what Marcus carried inside him. Volkov leaned forward slightly, his interest piqued despite himself. He had reviewed all the contestants' audition recordings, but he hadn't expected the blind boy to advance this far. There was something intriguing about him, a quiet confidence that didn't seem justified given his circumstances. The boy had technical skill, certainly, but Volkov doubted he had the emotional depth to truly interpret Chopin. Marcus settled on the bench, his hands hovering above the keys for just a moment before finding their position. He took a deep breath and then his fingers descended. The first notes of the ballade filled the hall, gentle, questioning, like the opening lines of a story. Marcus moved through the familiar introduction with a deliberate tenderness, letting each note breathe and speak before moving to the next. Volkov's eyebrows lifted slightly. The boy's technique was flawless, but it was his phrasing that caught the Russian's attention, the way he shaped each musical line as if he were speaking through the instrument. As the piece progressed and the music grew more complex, Marcus's body began to sway with the rhythm. His face transformed, eyes closed now not from blindness but from complete absorption in the music. His fingers danced across the keys with a precision that seemed impossible for someone who couldn't see them. The gentle introduction gave way to stormy passages, and Marcus attacked them with fierce intensity, his slight frame somehow channeling power that seemed beyond his years. Volkov leaned forward, his cold assessment warming to grudging respect. The boy was good, better than good. There was an authenticity to his playing that many trained musicians twice his age struggled to achieve. But as the piece approached its thunderous conclusion, something happened. Marcus hesitated for just a fraction of a second, his rhythm faltering. His left hand missed a chord, creating a dissonance that wasn't in the score. He recovered quickly, but Volkov had caught it. The mistake was small, but at this level of competition, small mistakes were fatal. The final chords resonated through the hall, and the audience erupted in applause. Many were on their feet, moved by the emotional journey despite the small slip. But Volkov remained seated, his face returning to its mask of indifference. One mistake was all it took to separate the truly great from the merely talented. Marcus acknowledged the applause with a slight bow in the direction of the audience. His face betrayed nothing of the disappointment he must have felt. He remained on the bench, preparing for his original composition. "And now," the host announced as the applause died down, "Mr. Jefferson will perform his original piece titled Shadows and Light." Volkov suppressed a sigh. Student compositions were rarely interesting, usually derivative works that borrowed too heavily from the masters without understanding the underlying structures. He prepared himself for 3 minutes of mediocrity. Marcus positioned his hands again, took another deep breath, and began to play. The first notes were simple, a sparse melody in the right hand accompanied by open fifths in the left. There was nothing technically impressive about it, but something in the progression of notes caught Volkov's ear. It wasn't a conventional melody. It moved in unexpected intervals, creating a haunting quality that felt both modern and timeless. As the piece developed, Marcus began to layer complexity upon complexity. What had started as a simple theme transformed into a rich tapestry of sound. His left hand created rhythmic patterns that seemed impossible to coordinate with what his right was doing, yet he navigated them with ease. The music spoke of darkness and struggle, of searching fingers finding their way through an unseen world. There were moments of dissonance that should have been jarring but instead felt necessary, like the sound of confronting hard truths. And then, just as the tension became almost unbearable, the music opened up into a passage of such pure beauty that Volkov felt his chest tighten. The melody soared above cascading arpeggios, speaking of transcendence and joy found despite, or perhaps because of, the darkness that had come before. Volkov found himself leaning forward, all pretense of indifference abandoned. This wasn't just good for a student composition. This was music that deserved to be heard, that said something new in a language as old as human emotion. The boy played as if the piano were an extension of his own body, as if the music were flowing directly from his soul to the keys without the intermediary of thought. When the final notes faded, there was a moment of complete silence. No one moved. No one breathed. It was as if the audience collectively needed a moment to return to the reality of the concert hall after being transported to wherever Marcus's music had taken them. Then the applause began, hesitant at first, then building to a roar. People rose to their feet, some wiping away tears. Marcus stood from the bench, finding his cane and bowing again toward the sound. Volkov remained seated, his mind racing. The boy had talent. Real, undeniable talent. But there was something else, something that tugged at Volkov's professional pride. How could a child, a blind child no less, create music with such emotional maturity? It felt almost threatening to the careful mythology Volkov had built around his own genius. The judges conferred briefly, but the outcome was clear. When the host stepped forward to announce the winner, no one was surprised to hear Marcus Jefferson's name. The audience's approval was thunderous. "And now," the host continued once the applause had died down, "we have a special treat. As per the competition's tradition, our winner will perform a duet with our guest of honor, the incomparable Nikolai Volkov." The audience applauded again as Volkov rose from his seat and made his way to the stage. His face was composed into a gracious smile, but inside a conflict raged. Part of him, the artist, the musician, was genuinely moved by the boy's talent and wanted to nurture it. But another part, the part that had grown accustomed to being hailed as a singular genius, was disturbed by the raw ability he had just witnessed. As Volkov approached the piano, he made a split-second decision. He would remind everyone, including this prodigious child, who was the master here. "Congratulations, young man," he said, his Russian accent thick but his English precise. "Your Chopin was adequate, despite the mistake in the coda, but your composition showed promise." The faint praise was deliberate, designed to put the boy in his place. Marcus turned toward Volkov's voice. "Thank you, Mr. Volkov. It's an honor to play with you." "We'll see if you can keep up," Volkov replied, just quietly enough that the microphones wouldn't catch it. "I suggest Rachmaninoff's Suite No. 2 for two pianos. Are you familiar with it?" It was a challenging choice, one that required not just technical prowess, but seamless communication between pianists. Volkov knew it was unfair to expect a child, especially one who couldn't see, to perform it without preparation. He was setting the boy up to fail. "Yes, sir," Marcus replied simply. "I know it well." Volkov blinked in surprise but recovered quickly. The first movement then, a la Marcia. A second piano was wheeled onto the stage, and Marcus was guided to it. The two pianists sat facing each other, Volkov confident and commanding, Marcus still and focused. The audience watched with bated breath as Volkov counted them in. The piece began with a march-like theme, bold and assertive. Volkov attacked the keys with precision and force, establishing a tempo that was slightly faster than usual, another small challenge for the boy. But Marcus matched him note for note, his timing perfect despite the accelerated pace. As they moved through the intricate exchanges where melodies passed between the two pianos like a conversation between equals, Volkov began to increase the tempo even more, pushing beyond what was written in the score. Marcus never faltered. He not only kept pace but began to add subtle variations to his dynamics and articulation, bringing new colors to the music that Volkov hadn't considered. It was as if the boy was gently suggesting a different interpretation, one that honored the composer's intentions while bringing fresh insight to the piece. Volkov felt a flush of irritation. This was supposed to be a showcase for his mentorship, not a battle of equals. He pressed harder, his fingers flying across the keys and passages of technical brilliance that had earned him accolades around the world. But with each escalation, Marcus responded in kind, his unseeing eyes now lifted toward the ceiling, his face alive with the joy of musical conversation. There was no competitiveness in his expression, only the pure pleasure of making music with another skilled artist. And that, somehow, irritated Volkov even more. As the movement built toward its climax, Volkov played with a ferocity that bordered on aggression, but Marcus's piano sang in response, his touch somehow both powerful and light, finding the lyricism within the storm of notes. When the final chords came, the two pianos resolving together in harmonic completion, the hall erupted once more. Volkov stood, acknowledging the applause with a practiced bow. Marcus rose more carefully, finding his balance before bowing as well. The host returned to the stage, beaming with excitement. "Magnificent," she exclaimed. "What a perfect demonstration of musical partnership. And now, Mr. Volkov will present the official scholarship certificate to our winner." Volkov took the framed certificate and turned toward Marcus. This was the moment when he was expected to say a few words of encouragement to the young talent, to welcome him into the fraternity of serious musicians with gracious mentorship. The audience waited expectantly. Instead, a strange impulse took hold of him, one born of pride and perhaps a touch of fear. Looking at the boy's serene face, Volkov felt a sudden need to assert his dominance, to put this upstart in his place before he could threaten the carefully constructed pedestal upon which Volkov's reputation rested. "You have technical ability," Volkov said, his microphone carrying his words to every corner of the hall, "but true musicianship requires more than memorized notes and emotional tricks. It requires vision." The word choice was deliberate, cruel. A murmur ran through the audience. Perhaps with proper guidance you might one day understand the difference. The silence that followed was shocked, uncomfortable. The host's smile froze on her face. In the front row, Marcus's mother half rose from her seat, her expression a mixture of outrage and pain. And Marcus? He stood perfectly still, his face betraying nothing but a slight tightening around his mouth. When he spoke, his voice was clear and steady. "Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Volkov. I look forward to learning from you." The dignity of the response only fueled Volkov's irrational irritation. He thrust the certificate toward the boy, forgetting momentarily that Marcus couldn't see the gesture. When Marcus didn't take it, Volkov's lips curled into a smirk. "Your certificate," he said pointedly. "Or do you need assistance with that as well?" The backstage area of Carnegie Hall buzzed with barely contained chaos. Staff members exchanged shocked glances, sponsors whispered behind programs, and the competition organizers huddled in an emergency meeting. No one quite knew how to respond to what had just happened on stage. Nikolai Volkov, the most celebrated pianist of his generation, had publicly humiliated a blind 14-year-old boy who had just delivered one of the most moving performances in the competition's history. In a small dressing room away from the commotion, Marcus sat quietly with his mother, Diane Jefferson. A former jazz singer who had given up her career to raise her son after his father's death, Diane was a fierce protector with a gentle soul. Right now, that fierceness was at the forefront. "That man has no right to speak to you that way," she said, pacing the small room. "No right at all. Who does he think he is?" "The most famous pianist in the world," Marcus replied matter-of-factly, his fingers tracing the edge of the certificate that had been hastily handed to him after the awkward conclusion of the ceremony. "I don't care if he's God himself come down to play piano. Nobody talks to my boy like that." Diane stopped pacing and knelt in front of her son, taking his hands. "Marcus, look at me." It was a phrase she'd never stopped using, even though Marcus had lost his sight at the age of 4. To him, looking meant turning his attention fully to the speaker, and he did so now, his face angled toward his mother's voice. "You were magnificent out there. Don't you let what that man said dim your light for 1 second, you understand me?" Marcus nodded, but there was something troubling in his expression. Not hurt exactly, but a kind of puzzlement. "He was afraid," he said after a moment. "What?" "Mr. Volkov. When we were playing together, I could feel it. He was afraid." Diane shook her head. "Afraid of what? You're a child and he's—" "That's just it," Marcus interrupted. "I'm a child. I'm not supposed to be able to play the way I do." He paused, his unseeing eyes seeming to look through the walls. "And I'm blind. And I'm black. I'm everything he doesn't expect to be threatened by." The wisdom in his words struck Diane silent. At 14, her son understood the complex interplay of prejudice, fear, and power in ways that many adults never would. Before she could respond, a knock at the door broke the moment. "Marcus? Mrs. Jefferson?" It was Eliza Chen, the competition director. "May I come in?" Diane opened the door, her expression guarded. Eliza entered, looking flustered and apologetic. "I want to express my deepest apologies for what happened tonight," she began. "Mr. Volkov's comments were completely inappropriate and in no way reflect the values of our competition." "Yet you stood by and said nothing," Diane observed coolly. Eliza had the grace to look ashamed. "It happened so quickly and frankly we were all stunned. But I assure you we've spoken with him and—" "Is he going to apologize?" Diane asked. A hesitation. "Mr. Volkov feels that his comments were misinterpreted." "Misinterpreted?" Diane's voice rose. "He made a deliberate jab at my son's blindness in front of thousands of people. What exactly did we misinterpret?" Marcus reached out, finding his mother's arm. "Mom, it's okay." "It is not okay, Marcus." "Mrs. Jefferson," Eliza interjected, "I understand your anger, but the scholarship offer still stands, and this opportunity could be transformative for Marcus's career. Mr. Volkov has agreed to honor his commitment to mentor the winner, despite personal differences." Diane's laugh was bitter. "Personal differences? Is that what we're calling blatant discrimination now?" "Mom," Marcus said again, his voice quiet but firm. "I want to do it." Both women turned to look at him. "What?" Diane asked. "The scholarship, the mentorship. I want to do it." Marcus's face was set with determination. "I earned this, and I'm not going to let him take it away from me because he's afraid of what I might become." The room fell silent. Diane studied her son's face, recognizing the same quiet resolve she'd seen in him since he was a small child, learning to navigate a world of darkness. She'd raised him to stand his ground, to never let his circumstances define him. How could she argue with him now for embodying exactly what she'd taught him? "Are you sure about this?" she asked finally. Marcus nodded. "I'm sure." Eliza looked relieved. "The pre-college program begins in 3 weeks. Mr. Volkov will conduct master classes once a month with the first session scheduled for the opening week. We'll send all the details to your email." After Eliza left, Diane sat beside her son, wrapping an arm around his shoulders. "You know this won't be easy. That man has already shown his true colors." Marcus leaned against her. "I know, but I didn't learn to play piano because it was easy. I learned because when I play, I can see again, in my own way. The music creates shapes and colors and worlds in my mind." He paused. "And besides, Mr. Volkov may be a jerk, but he's still one of the best pianists alive. I can learn from him, even if he doesn't want to teach me." Diane pressed a kiss to the top of his head, a complex mixture of pride and worry swirling in her chest. Her son was wise beyond his years, but he was still just a boy walking into a lion's den. 3 weeks later, Marcus and Diane arrived at the imposing stone building that housed Juilliard's pre-college program. Students of all ages hurried past, instrument cases slung over their shoulders, the air buzzing with nervous excitement for the first day of the semester. As they made their way to the orientation room, Marcus heard whispers following him. "That's him, the blind kid from the competition. Did you see what Volkov said to him? So harsh. I heard Volkov tried to back out of mentoring him. My teacher says the kid's got more talent in his left hand than most pianists have in their entire body." Marcus kept his face neutral, but his grip on his mother's arm tightened slightly. Fame was a strange new territory, and he wasn't sure he liked being known more for the controversy than for his music. The orientation room was filled with chattering students and anxious parents. A hush fell over the crowd as Marcus entered, followed by another round of whispers. A tall woman with a brisk, efficient manner approached them. "Marcus Jefferson. I'm Dr. Eleanor Abernathy, director of the pre-college piano division. We're delighted to have you with us." "Thank you," Marcus replied, extending his hand in the direction of her voice. "This is my mother, Diane Jefferson." Dr. Abernathy shook both their hands. "Mrs. Jefferson, we've arranged for all of Marcus's materials to be available in Braille, and our facilities are fully accessible. If there's anything else he needs, please don't hesitate to let us know." "I appreciate that," Diane said, her voice warm but her eyes still evaluating. She'd learned to be cautious with institutions, no matter how prestigious. Too often their idea of accommodation fell far short of what her son actually needed. "Now," Dr. Abernathy continued, "the master class with Mr. Volkov will begin in 30 minutes in the Paul Hall. Each student will perform a prepared piece, and Mr. Volkov will provide individualized instruction." "And will Mr. Volkov be providing any specialized instruction on vision?" Diane asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Dr. Abernathy had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Mrs. Jefferson, I want to assure you that what happened at the competition was deeply troubling to all of us at Juilliard. Mr. Volkov has been spoken to, and we have made it clear that such behavior is unacceptable." "Words are easy," Diane replied. "Actions matter more." "I understand. All I can ask is that you give him, a chance to make this right." Dr. Abernathy turned to Marcus. "Are you prepared for today's class?" Marcus nodded. Yes, ma'am, I'll be playing Bach's Italian Concerto, first movement. Excellent choice. Well, I'll leave you to prepare. Someone will come for you when it's time to move to the hall. After she left, Diane turned to her son. You're sure about this? We can still walk away. Marcus shook his head. I need to be here, Mom. This is where I belong. Paul Hall was smaller than Carnegie, but no less intimidating in its own way. With seating for 275, the recital space had perfect acoustics and a reputation for unforgiving clarity. Every mistake would be audible, every nuance exposed. The hall was filled with students, parents, and faculty members eager to witness the first master class of the semester, especially given the controversy still swirling around Volkov and his newest pupil. Marcus sat in the front row, listening to the rustle of programs and the murmured conversations around him. He could sense the anticipation in the room, the collective breath held as everyone waited for the confrontation they all expected. His own heart beat a steady rhythm in his chest, not from fear, but from a calm determination that had settled over him like a mantle. A sudden hush fell over the crowd, followed by enthusiastic applause. Nikolai Volkov had entered the hall. Marcus could hear the measured, confident footsteps approaching the stage, the slight creak of the piano bench as the master took his seat. Welcome to the first master class of the semester. Volkov's accented voice projected throughout the hall without the need for amplification. Today, each of you will play, and I will critique. My comments may be harsh. I do not believe in protecting fragile egos, but they will always be honest. True growth comes only through the confrontation of one's weaknesses. There was a rustle of nervous movement among the students. Volkov continued, We will begin with Bach. Marcus Jefferson, you will play first. A faculty member appeared at Marcus's side to guide him to the stage. As he made his way up the steps, cane tapping lightly before him, the hall fell completely silent. He could feel the weight of every gaze upon him, the collective curiosity and anticipation. He found the piano bench and settled himself, taking a moment to orient his hands on the keyboard. The Steinway under his fingers was different from the one he practiced on at home, slightly wider keys, a heavier action. But he'd learned long ago to adapt quickly to different instruments. Just before he began to play, Volkov spoke again, his voice closer now. Mr. Jefferson, before you begin, I wish to say something. Marcus turned his head slightly toward the voice, waiting. At the competition, my comments were poorly chosen. The words seemed to cost Volkov considerable effort. The task of a teacher is to illuminate, not to diminish. I failed in this task. It wasn't exactly an apology, but from what Marcus had heard of Volkov's legendary pride, it was more than anyone might have expected. The hall was so quiet that Marcus could hear people holding their breath. Thank you, Mr. Volkov, he said simply, then turned back to the piano. His fingers descended on the keys, and Bach's Italian Concerto sprang to life, bright, intricate, and joyful. The opening theme danced from his hands with crystalline clarity, each voice in the complex counterpoint distinct, yet part of the greater whole. Marcus played with the precision Bach demanded, but also with a rhythmic vitality that made the centuries-old music feel fresh and immediate. As he played, Marcus felt, rather than saw, Volkov moving around the stage, listening from different angles. The Russian's presence was like a physical force, intense and evaluating, but Marcus remained focused on the music, letting Bach's intricate patterns flow through him. When the final chord resonated through the hall, there was a moment of silence followed by enthusiastic applause. Marcus sat still, waiting for Volkov's critique, prepared for harshness but determined to learn from whatever came. Well, Volkov said as the applause died down, it seems I was mistaken about one thing. He paused, and the hall grew tense once more. You do not need my help with Bach. A surprised murmur ran through the audience. Volkov continued, his voice taking on a more didactic tone. Your technique is excellent. Your understanding of counterpoint is mature, but here it was, the criticism they all expected. Your ornamentation in the repeat of the first section was somewhat conventional. Bach leaves room for the performer's personality here. Where is yours? It was a legitimate musical critique delivered without condescension or cruelty. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. Let me show you, Volkov said, and to everyone's surprise, he slid onto the bench beside Marcus. May I? Of course, Marcus replied, shifting slightly to make room. Volkov played the passage in question, his interpretation more daring, with unexpected rhythmic freedoms and ornamental flourishes that somehow felt both improvisatory and inevitable. You see the difference? And he asked when he finished. Marcus smiled slightly. I hear it, he corrected gently. There was a beat of silence, and then Volkov did something no one expected. He laughed, a genuine, unguarded sound. Yes, of course, you hear it. Now you try. For the next 15 minutes, the two worked on the passage, with Volkov offering suggestions and Marcus implementing them with remarkable quickness. The audience watched in fascination as the master and the student engaged in a musical conversation that transcended the tension that had existed between them. It wasn't friendship, not yet, but it was respect, however grudging on Volkov's part. As Marcus finally played the passage to Volkov's satisfaction, the Russian nodded in approval. Good, very good. Now we move on to the next student. As Marcus was guided back to his seat, he felt a curious lightness. The battle he had expected had not materialized, or perhaps it had been fought and won in a different way than anyone had anticipated. Volkov's resistance had not disappeared entirely, but something had shifted. A door had opened just a crack, and for Marcus that was enough for now. He had the rest of the semester to open it further. The weeks following the first masterclass passed in a blur of practice rooms, theory classes, and private lessons. Marcus quickly established a routine, navigating the Juilliard building with increasing confidence. By the third week, he no longer needed a guide to find his way from the main entrance to his favorite practice room on the 4th floor, a small space with a Steinway M that had, to his sensitive touch, the perfect balance of brightness and warmth. It was in this room, early on a Tuesday morning, that Marcus found himself working through a particularly challenging passage of a Liszt etude. The Hungarian composer's works were notorious for their technical demands, stretching the limits of what 10 fingers could physically accomplish on a keyboard. For Marcus, these challenges were compounded by the fact that he couldn't see the keyboard to make the enormous leaps Liszt required. As he practiced a sequence of arpeggios that spanned the entire keyboard, the door to his practice room opened. Marcus paused, turning toward the sound. "Don't stop on my account," came a familiar, accented voice. Marcus's hands froze above the keys. "Mr. Volkov?" "The same." The Russian's footsteps crossed the room, and Marcus could smell the faint scent of coffee and cologne. "I was passing by and heard you working on Liszt. La Campanella, yes?" "Yes, sir." "This was not assigned to you. Why are you learning it?" Marcus hesitated. "I wanted to challenge myself." "Challenge?" Volkov scoffed. "This piece is among the most difficult in the repertoire. Professional pianists with decades of experience struggle with it, and you—" "I know," Marcus interrupted, a boldness in his voice that surprised even himself. "But if I only play what's easy for me, I'll never grow." A heavy silence followed. Marcus could sense Volkov studying him, evaluating. "Play from the beginning," Volkov said finally. Marcus positioned his hands and began. The piece opened with delicate bell-like tones that gradually built into torrents of notes cascading across the keyboard. As he approached the section he'd been working on, a series of leaps that required precisely judged distances between hand positions, his confidence wavered. He missed a few notes, his timing faltered, and the musical line fragmented. "Stop," Volkov commanded. "This is the problem with ambition without proper foundation. You attempt what you are not ready for, and the result is—" He made a dismissive sound. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. "The issue is not your fingers," Volkov continued, his voice taking on a more analytical tone. "It is your spatial awareness. These leaps—" He played the passage Marcus had struggled with, his execution flawless. "These require a mental map of the keyboard that you have not yet developed." "I can develop it," Marcus said quietly. "Perhaps." The piano bench creaked as Volkov sat beside him. "Show me your hand." Marcus held out his right hand and Volkov took it, positioning it over the keys. "Feel the distance from middle C to the G above, now to the C above that, now to the G an octave and a fifth higher." He guided Marcus's hand through the intervals. "Your fingers must know these distances so well that they can find them without hesitation, without thought." For the next 20 minutes, Volkov worked with Marcus on a series of exercises designed to develop his spatial awareness of the keyboard. There was no praise, no encouragement, but there was also none of the cruelty from the competition. It was pure instruction, precise and demanding. When Volkov finally stood to leave, he paused. "Practice these exercises for 30 minutes each day before attempting the list again. When you can play them perfectly 10 times in a row, then, only then, return to La Campanella." "Yes, sir," Marcus replied, already mentally cataloging the exercises. "And Jefferson," Volkov added from the doorway, "next time consult me before adding pieces to your repertoire. That is what a teacher is for." After he left, Marcus sat still for a long moment, processing what had just happened. It wasn't warmth or kindness Volkov had shown him. Far from it, but it was something he hadn't expected. Genuine teaching. Volkov had seen a problem and instead of dismissing Marcus as incapable, had offered specific strategies to overcome it. It was a small step, but a significant one. Later that afternoon, Marcus sat in the student lounge, his fingers moving silently on the tabletop as he mentally practiced the exercises Volkov had given him. His concentration was broken by a light touch on his shoulder. "Is this seat taken?" a female voice asked. "No, go ahead," Marcus replied, turning toward the voice. "I'm Mei Lin," the girl said as she sat down. "You're Marcus Jefferson, right? I was in the master class with Volkov." "That's me," Marcus acknowledged with a small smile. "You play beautifully," Mei said. "I've been wanting to talk to you, but you always disappear right after classes." "Practice rooms," Marcus explained. "There's a lot to work on." "Tell me about it. I'm studying with Dr. Chen, and she's ruthless. 2 hours of scales every day, minimum." Her voice was bright and animated, without a trace of the awkwardness that often colored people's interactions with him. "So, rumor has it Volkov came to your practice room today?" Marcus nodded. "Word travels fast around here." "Like lightning," Mei agreed. "So, was he still being a jerk?" "Not exactly," Marcus said slowly. "He was teaching me, really teaching, not just criticizing." "Wow, that's unexpected. Volkov doesn't usually take an interest in pre-college students unless they're prodigies who can make him look good." There was a pause, and Marcus could feel her studying him. "Then again," she continued thoughtfully, "you are kind of a prodigy, aren't you?" Marcus shrugged, uncomfortable with the label. "I just work hard." "Said every prodigy ever," Mei laughed. "Seriously, though, what you did with that Bach in the master class, the way you picked up his suggestions instantly, that's not just hard work, that's talent, real talent." Before Marcus could respond, other students joined their table, curious about the new scholarship winner who had stood up to Volkov. Soon he found himself surrounded by a small group, answering questions about his background, his training, his experience at the competition. The initial wariness he'd sensed from his peers began to dissolve as they talked, replaced by a cautious acceptance. For the first time since arriving at Juilliard, Marcus felt like he might belong. That evening, as Diane drove them home to their small apartment in Brooklyn, Marcus told her about his encounter with Volkov. "He actually helped you?" Diane asked, surprise evident in her voice. "No snide comments about vision or whatever?" "None," Marcus confirmed. "It was just about the music." "Well," Diane said, a smile in her voice, "maybe the man has a shred of decency after all. Or maybe he just couldn't stand hearing Liszt butchered in his precious Juilliard," Marcus suggested with a wry grin. They both laughed, the tension that had accompanied every mention of Volkov's name beginning to ease. Later that night, long after Marcus had gone to bed, Diane sat at their small kitchen table, looking through the pile of bills that had arrived that day. The scholarship covered Marcus's tuition, but everything else, rent, utilities, food, transportation, the specialized equipment Marcus needed, fell to her. Her job as an administrative assistant at a local community college barely covered their expenses, and the savings she'd set aside for emergencies was dwindling. She rubbed her eyes, fatigue settling deep in her bones. The truth was, she couldn't keep this up much longer. Something would have to give. But she wouldn't let it be Marcus's dream. Not when he'd come so far, worked so hard. Not when even someone like Volkov was beginning to see what she had always known, that her son was extraordinary. She would find a way somehow. The next day, as Marcus practiced his scales in preparation for his regular lesson with Dr. Abernathy, the door to his practice room opened again. This time, it wasn't Volkov, but Dr. Abernathy herself. "Marcus," she said, her usually brisk tone softened by what sounded like concern, "I need to speak with you about something. Can you take a break?" Marcus turned from the piano. "Of course, Dr. Abernathy. Is something wrong?" "Not wrong, exactly." She sat on the spare chair in the corner of the room. "I've been reviewing your progress, and it's exceptional. Your theory grades are top of the class, your performance in the master class was remarkable, and your practice discipline is exemplary." "Thank you," Marcus said, uncertain where this was heading. "The thing is, Marcus, I think you're being underutilized in the pre-college program. Your skills and understanding are already beyond many of our first-year college students." Marcus sat very still, processing her words. "What are you suggesting?" "I'd like to recommend you for a special accelerated track. You would continue with your pre-college classes, but also sit in on selected college-level courses and receive additional private instruction." She paused. "Including regular sessions with Mr. Volkov." Marcus's heart raced. This was both thrilling and terrifying. "Regular sessions with Mr. Volkov?" "Yes. He specifically requested it, which is unprecedented to say the least." Marcus couldn't hide his shock. "He requested to teach me? After everything that happened?" Dr. Abernathy's voice took on a thoughtful quality. "You know, in all my years at Juilliard, I've never quite figured Volkov out. He can be cruel, dismissive, arrogant, but he also has an almost religious devotion to musical excellence. I think in you he sees something that transcends his ordinary prejudices." She leaned forward. "But Marcus, this would mean a much more demanding schedule. Are you prepared for that?" "Yes," Marcus said without hesitation. "Absolutely." "Good. There's just one more thing." Dr. Abernathy's voice grew hesitant. This program would require you to be on campus 4 full days a week instead of 2. I understand your mother works, and transportation might be an issue. Marcus's enthusiasm dimmed slightly. He knew how hard his mother was already working to make his current schedule possible. I'll talk to her about it. Please do. And Marcus. Dr. Abernathy stood to leave. Whatever happens, know that you've already made an impression here that won't be forgotten. After she left, Marcus sat at the piano, his fingers resting lightly on the silent keys. The opportunity Dr. Abernathy had presented was everything he'd dreamed of, a chance to study at the highest level, to push his abilities to their limits, to learn from one of the greatest pianists alive. But at what cost to his mother? He knew the financial strain they were already under. Could he ask her to sacrifice even more? As he wrestled with these thoughts, his fingers began to move of their own accord, picking out a melody he'd been composing in his head, a piece about struggle and hope, about finding light in darkness. The music flowed from some deep place within him, raw and unpolished but full of emotion. He was so absorbed in the creation that he didn't hear the door open once more, didn't sense the presence that paused in the doorway, listening intently to the improvised composition. It wasn't until he'd played the final cadence that a voice broke the silence. "That," said Nikolai Volkov, "is what I want to teach you to develop. Not just technique, not just interpretation, but this voice that is uniquely yours." Marcus turned, startled. "Mr. Volkov, I didn't know you were there." "Clearly." Volkov entered the room fully, closing the door behind him. "That piece, is it published?" "No, it's just something I've been working on. It's not finished." "Good. Bring it to our first private session on Friday. We will begin there." As Volkov's footsteps receded down the hall, Marcus sat in stunned silence. The great pianist had heard his composition, his personal, unpolished creation, and instead of dismissing it, had chosen it as their starting point. Something was changing in Volkov's perception of him. The question was, why? The conversation with Diane about the accelerated program went exactly as Marcus had feared. They sat at their small kitchen table, the remains of a simple dinner between them as he explained Dr. Abernathy's proposal. 4 days a week? Diane repeated, her voice strained despite her obvious effort to sound supportive. "Marcus, that's twice what we're doing now." "I know, Mom, but this is an amazing opportunity. Dr. Abernathy says they've never offered this to a pre-college student before." Diane was quiet for a long moment, and Marcus could hear her fingers tapping against the tabletop, a habit she had when working through a difficult problem. "It's the transportation that's the issue," she said finally. "I can't take you 4 days a week and still keep my job. We'd need to find someone reliable to drive you the other days, and that costs money we don't have." "What about public transit?" Marcus suggested. "I could learn the subway route." "Absolutely not." Diane's voice was firm. "You're 14 years old. I'm not sending you alone on the New York subway system. Other blind people navigate it. Other blind people aren't my son. End of discussion." Marcus sighed, frustration building in his chest. His blindness had never felt like a limitation when he was at the piano. But in moments like this, the practical realities of his condition crashed down on him like a wave. "Maybe Dr. Abernathy knows of some transportation options," he tried, "or maybe there's additional scholarship money for situations like this." "Maybe," Diane said, but the skepticism in her voice was clear. Later that night, as Marcus lay in bed, unable to sleep, he overheard his mother on the phone. Her voice was hushed, but in their small apartment, sound carried easily. "I don't want to ask you for this, James, but I'm out of options." "Yes, it's for Marcus." 4 days a week, to and from Juilliard. "I know it's a lot, but this opportunity." "Yes, I understand you have your own life. Just think about it, that's all I'm asking." James was Marcus's uncle, his father's brother. The relationship between James and Diane had been strained since Marcus's father died 10 years ago. James had never quite forgiven Diane for what he saw as her role in his brother's decision to enlist in the military, a decision that had ultimately cost him his life. The fact that he lived in Queens, not far from the route to Manhattan, made him the logical person to ask for help, but Marcus knew how much it must have cost his mother to make that call. The next morning, Diane was unusually quiet as she drove Marcus to Juilliard for his regular classes. It wasn't until they were almost there that she spoke. "I called your Uncle James last night," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "I know, I heard." Diane sighed. "I'm sorry, Marcus. I tried to keep it quiet." "It's okay." "What did he say?" "He said he'd think about it, which probably means no." Diane's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "But I'm not giving up. This opportunity is too important. We'll find a way." Marcus reached across the center console, finding his mother's arm and squeezing it gently. "I know we will." As they pulled up to the Juilliard building, Diane turned to him. "You've got your private session with Volkov today, right? The first one?" "Yeah, this afternoon." "Well, knock his socks off." The smile was back in her voice, the worry temporarily set aside. "Show him what a Jefferson can do." Marcus grinned. "That's the plan." The morning classes passed in a blur, Marcus's mind preoccupied with thoughts of the upcoming session with Volkov. He had spent the past 2 days refining his composition, working out the rough patches, clarifying his musical ideas. Still, he felt a nervousness that he hadn't experienced since the competition. This wasn't about performing someone else's music anymore. This was about sharing his own creative voice with one of the most critical ears in the classical world. At precisely 2 o'clock, Marcus made his way to the faculty studio where his lesson was scheduled. He knocked on the door, his heart pounding in his chest. "Enter," came Volkov's voice from within. The studio was larger than the practice rooms, with higher ceilings that created a more resonant acoustic environment. Marcus could hear the difference as soon as he stepped inside, the sound of his cane on the floor bouncing back to him with greater clarity. "You're on time. Good." Volkov's voice came from across the room. "Punctuality is respect for the music and for the teacher." "Yes, sir," Marcus replied, making his way toward the sound of Volkov's voice. "The piano is 3 steps ahead of you, slightly to your right." Marcus found it easily, setting his cane against the wall before seating himself on the bench. The piano was a full concert grand, its action heavier and its tone richer than the smaller instruments in the practice rooms. "Before we begin," Volkov said, "tell me about your composition. What is it called? What inspired it?" Marcus hesitated. He hadn't been prepared for such direct questions about his creative process. "It doesn't have a title yet," he admitted. "And as for inspiration, it's about finding my way, I guess. About navigating a world I can't see but can feel and hear." Volkov's voice gave nothing away. "Play it for me, from the beginning, as you conceive it now." Marcus positioned his hands and began to play. The piece opened with a simple, questioning melody in the right hand, supported by open fifths in the left, the musical idea Volkov had overheard him developing in the practice room. From there, it evolved into a more complex exploration of themes, sometimes dissonant and searching, sometimes finding momentary resolution before venturing into new territory. As he played, Marcus became aware of Volkov moving around the room, listening from different angles, occasionally making a soft sound that might have been approval or disagreement. It was impossible to tell. When Marcus finished, there was a long silence. He waited, fingers still resting on the keys, unsure what to expect. "Your harmonic language is interesting," Volkov said finally. "Not conventional, but not random either. It has its own logic." The Russian's footsteps approached the piano. "But the structure is weak. It wanders without purpose, like a river that hasn't decided where it wants to go. Marcus nodded, taking the criticism in stride. I'm still working on the form. Let me show you something. The bench shifted as Volkov sat beside him. May I play a section? Of course. Volkov played a passage from the middle of Marcus's piece, then seamlessly transitioned into a variation of it, one that preserved the essence of Marcus's idea, but gave it greater coherence and direction. You hear the difference? Volkov asked. Yes, Marcus replied, genuinely impressed. You're developing the motif more systematically. Exactly. In composition, as in architecture, you need both creativity and structure. You have plenty of the former. It's the latter we need to work on. Volkov played another section, again transforming it with subtle but significant changes. Try this passage now. For the next hour, they worked through the composition methodically, with Volkov offering suggestions for structural improvements and Marcus implementing them, sometimes accepting Volkov's ideas wholesale, sometimes adapting them to better fit his own vision. It was an intense, focused collaboration, and Marcus was surprised to find that Volkov treated his creative choices with genuine respect, never imposing his own aesthetic but rather offering tools to help Marcus express his musical ideas more effectively. You have a distinctive voice, Volkov said as the session drew to a close. Raw, untrained, but distinctive. This is rare, even among accomplished musicians. Coming from Volkov, this was high praise indeed, and Marcus felt a flush of pride. For next week, Volkov continued, I want you to complete the piece, apply what we've discussed today, and also prepare the first movement of Beethoven's Pathetique Sonata. We need to work on your classical form. Yes, sir, Marcus replied, already mentally planning his practice schedule. As he gathered his things to leave, Volkov spoke again, his tone uncharacteristically hesitant. Your mother, she is raising you alone, yes? The question caught Marcus off guard. Yes. My father died when I was 4, right around the time I lost my sight. I see. There was a pause. And she drives you to Juilliard? Yes, sir. Another pause, longer this time. Dr. Abernathy mentioned that transportation might be an issue for the accelerated program. Marcus's heart sank. He hadn't expected this conversation to come up so soon. We're working on it, he said, trying to sound confident. The non-committal sound gave nothing away. Well, don't let practical matters interfere with your musical development. That would be unfortunate. With that cryptic statement, Volkov dismissed him, and Marcus made his way out of the studio, his mind swirling with questions. Why was Volkov suddenly interested in his personal circumstances? Was it just professional concern for a promising student or something else? Marcus didn't have long to ponder these questions. As he navigated the hallway, a now familiar voice called out to him. Hey, piano prodigy, how to go with the Russian tyrant? Marcus smiled, recognizing Mei Lin's voice. Better than expected, actually. He liked my composition. Seriously? Volkov liked something a student wrote? The apocalypse must be nigh. Mei fell into step beside him, her footsteps light and quick compared to his more measured pace. A bunch of us are going to get bubble tea after theory class tomorrow. Want to join? Sure, Marcus replied, surprised and pleased by the invitation. That sounds fun. Cool. Oh, and fair warning, everyone's going to interrogate you about your private lessons with Volkov. He's like this mythical creature around here. Half the students are terrified of him, and the other half would sacrifice their firstborn for a chance to study with him. Marcus laughed. Which half are you in? Oh, I'm in the third secret half, Mei said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. The half that thinks he's just a man with extraordinary talent and an equally extraordinary ego. Talented, yes. Godlike, no. I'm starting to think you might be right, Marcus said thoughtfully. Of course I'm right. I'm always right. It's a burden I bear. The humor in her voice made Marcus smile again. Seriously though, I'm glad it went well. You deserve it after the way he treated you at the competition. As they reached the main entrance, May said goodbye, promising to find him after theory class the next day. Marcus waited on the steps for his mother, his mood lighter than it had been in days. The session with Volkov had been challenging but deeply satisfying, and now it seemed he might be making friends as well. For a moment, the worries about transportation and finances receded, replaced by a quiet contentment. The contentment was short-lived. When Diane arrived to pick him up, her voice was tight with stress. Your uncle called, she said as they drove home. He can't help us, or won't. Same difference in the end. Marcus's spirits sank. Did he say why? Some excuse about his work schedule. He said he'd pay for a car service, but with New York traffic, that could cost hundreds a week. Diane's frustration was palpable. I'll figure something out, Marcus. Maybe I can talk to my boss about adjusting my hours or find someone at Juilliard who lives near us. Her voice trailed off, and Marcus could hear the exhaustion beneath her determined words. He hated being the cause of her stress, hated that his opportunity was creating such difficulty for her. Mom, if it's too much, I can just stick with the regular pre-college program. It's still a great education. Absolutely not. Diane's voice was fierce. You're not settling for less than you deserve because of logistics. We'll make it work. When they arrived home, Marcus went straight to his room, his earlier elation replaced by a heavy weight of worry. He sat at the small keyboard he used for practice at home, but for once, music brought no comfort. All he could think about was the strain on his mother's face, the weariness in her voice. There had to be a solution, something they hadn't thought of yet. As he sat there, fingers resting silently on the keys, an idea began to form in his mind. It was audacious, perhaps even foolish, but it might just work. Tomorrow, after his theory class and before meeting May for bubble tea, he would take a detour to Dr. Abernathy's office, and he would ask her a question that might change everything. The next day, after his theory class ended, Marcus navigated the now familiar hallways toward Dr. Abernathy's office. His heart beat a rapid rhythm against his ribs as he rehearsed what he wanted to say. The plan that had formed in his mind the previous night was audacious, perhaps even inappropriate, but he couldn't see another way forward. He knocked on Dr. Abernathy's door, hoping she would be there. Come in, called her crisp voice. Marcus entered, his cane sweeping before him. Dr. Abernathy, it's Marcus Jefferson. Do you have a moment to talk? Of course, Marcus, please, sit down. He heard her move some papers aside. What can I do for you? Marcus took a deep breath. It's about the accelerated program. I've discussed it with my mother, and while we both want me to participate, we're facing some practical challenges with transportation. Yes, I was afraid of that, Dr. Abernathy replied, her tone sympathetic. 4 days a week is a significant commitment, especially from Brooklyn. That's why I wanted to ask. Marcus hesitated, then plunged forward. Is there any possibility of on-campus housing for pre-college students, even just for a few nights a week? He heard Dr. Abernathy shift in her chair. That's not something we typically offer to pre-college students, Marcus. There are liability concerns, supervision issues. I understand, Marcus said quickly, but I thought perhaps, given the circumstances, there might be some flexibility. Or maybe there's another solution I haven't thought of. Dr. Abernathy was quiet for a moment, and Marcus could almost hear her thinking. Let me look into it, she said finally. I can't make any promises, but this program is unprecedented, so perhaps we can find an unprecedented solution. Thank you, Marcus said, relief washing over him. I appreciate your help. Of course. Now, I believe you have a social engagement to get to? Ms. Lynn mentioned something about bubble tea. Marcus grinned. News really does travel fast around here. Like wildfire, Dr. Abernathy agreed, a smile in her voice. Go on, enjoy yourself. I'll be in touch about the housing situation. As Marcus made his way to the student lounge where he was meeting May and the others, his spirits lifted. Dr. Abernathy hadn't said no outright, which was more than he'd dared to hope for. The lounge was buzzing with conversation when he arrived. May's voice called out above the chatter, Marcus, over here. He navigated toward her voice, finding his way to a group of students gathered in one corner of the room. Everyone, this is Marcus Jefferson, Volkov's newest victim, May announced. Marcus, this is everyone. Well, not everyone, but you know what I mean. There was a chorus of greetings, and Marcus tried to match voices to the names that followed. Zhang, a cellist from Beijing. Tyler, a violinist from Chicago. Sophia, a flutist from Miami. And Elliot, a composer from Boston. We've been dying to know, Elliot said as they walked to the bubble tea shop a few blocks away. What's Volkov really like in private lessons? Is he as brutal as they say? Marcus considered the question. He's demanding, definitely, but he's also insightful. He hears things in my playing that I didn't even realize were there. That tracks, Zhang said. My teacher studied with him at Moscow Conservatory. She says he can be horrible, but if you survive his teaching, you come out transformed. If you survive, Tyler muttered. That's the key phrase. The bubble tea shop was small and crowded with bright colors and K-pop playing over the speakers. The group found a table in the corner, and May guided Marcus through the menu options. Trust me, go for the taro with boba. It's life-changing, she insisted. As they sat drinking their tea and talking, Marcus was struck by how normal it felt. For a few precious hours, he wasn't the blind pianist or Volkov's special student. He was just another music student, sharing stories and complaints about theory homework and difficult passages and demanding teachers. So, Sophia asked during a lull in the conversation, is it true you're being offered the accelerated track? The one usually reserved for college students, Marcus nodded, stirring his tea with the oversized straw. Yes, but there are some logistical issues to work out. Like what? May asked. Transportation, mostly. My mom works full-time and she can't drive me 4 days a week without losing her job. We tried to find alternatives, but... He shrugged. That sucks, Tyler said sympathetically. The system's not set up for people who don't have, resources. Yeah, Marcus agreed, grateful for the understanding. I'm hoping Juilliard might help with a solution. Dr. Abernathy's looking into it. Well, if anyone can make something happen, it's her, Elliot said. She's got serious pull with the administration. The conversation shifted to other topics, and Marcus found himself relaxing into the camaraderie. These people understood the pressures and joys of serious musical study in a way that his friends from middle school never could. Here, his dedication wasn't weird or isolating, it was the norm. When Marcus returned home that evening, he found Diane already there, sitting at the kitchen table with what sounded like a stack of papers. You're home early, he observed, setting down his backpack. Half day at the office, she explained. How was your day? How is the bubble tea expedition? Marcus couldn't help smiling. You heard about that too. Moms have their sources, Diane said mysteriously. So, did you make some friends? I think so, Marcus replied, surprised to realize it was true. They're good people, serious about music but not stuck up about it. I'm glad. Diane's voice softened. You deserve to have friends who understand your world. Marcus hesitated, then decided to tell her about his conversation with Dr. Abernathy. Mom, I did something today. I hope you won't be upset. He explained his visit to Dr. Abernathy's office and his question about housing. As he spoke, he braced himself for his mother's reaction, unsure if she would be angry that he'd acted without consulting her. When he finished, Diane was quiet for a long moment. "On-campus housing," she said finally. "That's actually a practical solution. I wish I'd thought of it." "You're not mad?" "Mad? No, Marcus. I'm proud of you for taking initiative. And a little sad, if I'm being honest." "Sad? Why?" He heard Diane stand up and move around the table to his side. "Because it means you staying away from home, and I'll miss you. But that's just me being selfish." She pulled him into a hug. "You're growing up, finding your own solutions. That's exactly what you should be doing." Later that evening, as Marcus practiced his Beethoven on the keyboard in his room, his cell phone rang. The text-to-speech function announced, "Dr. Eleanor Abernathy." He answered quickly. "Hello? Marcus, it's Dr. Abernathy. I hope I'm not calling too late." "No, not at all." "Good. I wanted to let you know that I've spoken with the administration about your housing situation." Her voice was carefully neutral, giving nothing away. "It's not standard procedure, as I mentioned, but given the unique circumstances, they've agreed to a compromise." Marcus's breath caught. "What kind of compromise?" "We have a small apartment on campus that's typically reserved for visiting faculty. It's available for the rest of this semester. You could stay there the nights before your full days of classes, so 3 nights a week. Your mother would still need to drop you off Sunday evenings, but she would only need to pick you up on Thursdays." That's amazing." Marcus could hardly believe what he was hearing. "There's more," Dr. Abernathy continued. "Mr. Volkov has offered to cover the housing fees as an extension of your scholarship." Marcus froze. "Mr. Volkov? Why would he do that?" There was a slight pause. "He seems to have taken a particular interest in your development, Marcus. It's unusual, I'll admit. In all my years here, I've never known him to make such an offer." Marcus's mind raced. First the special instruction, now this financial support. What was Volkov's game? "This is a generous offer," Dr. Abernathy continued when Marcus didn't respond. "But I understand if you need time to discuss it with your mother." "Yes, I should definitely talk to her," Marcus said quickly. "Can I let you know tomorrow?" "Of course. Take the time you need to make the right decision for your family." After they hung up, Marcus sat motionless, the Beethoven forgotten. Why would Volkov, who had publicly humiliated him just weeks ago, now be offering to pay for his housing? It didn't make sense unless Volkov saw something in him, in his playing, in his composing, that was valuable enough to invest in. The thought both thrilled and unsettled him. He called for his mother, and when she came to his room, he explained Dr. Abernathy's offer, including Volkov's surprising involvement. Diane listened without interrupting, then said, "I don't understand this man. First he insults you in front of thousands of people. Then he takes a special interest in teaching you, and now he wants to pay for your housing. What's his angle?" "I don't know," Marcus admitted. "But does it matter? This solves our problem." "It matters if there are strings attached," Diane said firmly. "I don't want you feeling indebted to someone like him." "I won't," Marcus promised. "For me, it's just about the music, about learning from one of the best." Diane sighed. "I know how much this opportunity means to you, and this arrangement would make it possible." She was quiet for a moment, thinking. "Okay, we'll accept the offer, but with clear boundaries. This is a professional arrangement, not a personal favor. And at the first sign of any inappropriate behavior or unreasonable demands from Volkov, we're out. Agreed?" "Agreed," Marcus said, relief and excitement washing over him. The next day, Marcus informed Dr. Abernathy of their decision. The accelerated program would begin the following week, with Marcus staying in the faculty apartment Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday nights, and going home with his mother on Thursdays. As the day of his first overnight stay approached, Marcus found himself oscillating between excitement and nervousness. He had never spent a night away from home without his mother nearby. His blindness made him self-sufficient in many ways, but there were still countless small adaptations and systems they had developed together to make daily life manageable. "Are you sure you'll be okay?" Diane asked as she helped him pack a small suitcase that Sunday afternoon. "You'll have your laptop with the screen reader, your braille timer, your pill organizer." "Mom," Marcus interrupted gently, "I'll be fine. The apartment is small, and Dr. Abernathy said someone from Disabled Student Services will help me learn the layout. Plus, I'll have my cane, my phone, and the emergency contact list we made." Diane sighed. "I know. I'm being overprotective again." "Just a little," Marcus teased, "but I love you for it." The drive to Juilliard that evening was quiet, both of them lost in their own thoughts. When they arrived, Dr. Abernathy was waiting to show them to the apartment. "It's simple but comfortable," she explained as she led them down a hallway separate from the main conservatory building. "Bedroom, bathroom, small kitchenette. We've labeled everything in Braille, light switches, appliances, cabinets, and there's a resident assistant on this floor who's aware of your situation and available if you need anything." The apartment was indeed small, but to Marcus, who had shared a two-bedroom apartment with his mother his entire life, it felt spacious. He explored it carefully, creating a mental map of the space. "I think this will work well," he said, running his hands over the Braille labels on the microwave. After helping him unpack and going through the morning routine one more time, it was time for Diane to leave. Marcus could hear the worry in her voice as she hugged him goodbye. "Call me tonight before bed and first thing tomorrow morning," she instructed, "and any time in between if you need anything at all." "I will," Marcus promised. "Stop worrying. This is going to be great." After she left, Marcus sat on the edge of the bed, overcome by a sudden wave of both freedom and responsibility. For the first time in his life, he was truly on his own. The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying, but he didn't have long to dwell on it. His phone rang, the automated voice announcing, "Nikolai Volkov." Marcus's heart jumped. Why would Volkov be calling him on a Sunday evening? "Hello?" he answered, trying to keep his voice steady. "Jefferson." Volkov's accent seemed more pronounced over the phone. "You are settled in the apartment?" "Yes, sir, just getting organized now." "Good. I am calling to inform you that your first lesson tomorrow has been rescheduled. 8 a.m., my private studio, not the faculty studio we used before. Do you know where this is?" "No, sir." "Third floor, east wing, end of the hallway. Have someone show you tomorrow morning. Do not be late." And without waiting for a response, Volkov hung up. Marcus sat motionless, the phone still in his hand. An 8 a.m. lesson on his first full day in the program, with an unfamiliar location to navigate. It seemed like Volkov was testing him already, but if it was a test, Marcus was determined to pass it. He set his Braille alarm for 6 a.m., giving himself plenty of time to get ready and find Volkov's private studio. Then he unpacked his keyboard and began practicing the Beethoven Sonata, focusing on the sections they had yet to work on together. As his fingers moved over the keys, he couldn't help but wonder, what would tomorrow bring? And more importantly, what did Nikolai Volkov really want from him? The questions lingered in his mind as he played on into the evening, the music filling the small apartment with both beauty and uncertainty. Marcus woke before his alarm, his body tense with anticipation. Sleep had come fitfully, his dreams filled with labyrinthine hallways and Volkov's voice calling from rooms he couldn't find. The unfamiliar sounds of the building, pipes clanking, distant doors closing, the hum of the heating system, had kept him on edge throughout the night. He rose carefully, orienting himself in the strange room before beginning his morning routine. Everything took longer than usual. At home, he knew precisely where each item was placed, could move through the space with confidence. Here, each task required conscious thought, careful exploration. By the time he was dressed and ready, it was already 7:15 a.m. Marcus made his way to the main building, his cane sweeping methodically before him. He had memorized the route during yesterday's orientation, but now, alone, the journey seemed more complex. When he reached the main entrance, he asked the security guard for directions to Volkov's private studio. "Third floor, east wing, end of the hall," the guard confirmed. "But I don't think anyone's there this early. Are you sure about the time?" 8 o'clock, Marcus said firmly. Mr. Volkov was specific. The guard made a sound of surprise. "Volkov's never here before 10, but hey, what do I know?" He pointed Marcus toward the elevator, then quickly corrected himself. "Sorry, the elevator is to your right, about 20 feet ahead." Marcus thanked him and made his way forward. As the elevator carried him to the 3rd floor, his stomach knotted with tension. What if Volkov had given him the wrong information as some kind of test? Or worse, what if the famous pianist simply forgot their appointment and didn't show up at all? The 3rd floor was silent, the early morning stillness broken only by the tap of his cane and the soft padding of his footsteps. Marcus moved slowly, counting doorways, trying to determine which hallway would be the east wing. After a moment of hesitation, he turned right, reasoning that east would be toward the rising sun. The hallway seemed to stretch endlessly, and Marcus began to worry he'd made a wrong turn. Just as he was about to retrace his steps, he heard something, faint but unmistakable. Music. The delicate, precise notes of a Bach fugue played with such clarity and control that each voice seemed to exist in its own dimension while still forming part of a perfect whole. Marcus followed the sound, drawn forward as if by an invisible thread. The music grew louder, more distinct. It was coming from the end of the hall, from behind a heavy door that Marcus could feel beneath his fingertips when he finally reached it. He stood listening, unwilling to interrupt the performance, losing himself in the mathematical beauty of Bach's counterpoint as expressed through Volkov's masterful interpretation. When the final notes faded, Marcus waited a moment before knocking gently on the door. "Enter," came Volkov's voice from within. Marcus opened the door and stepped into what felt like a much larger space than the faculty studio they'd used before. The acoustics were different, warmer, with a subtle resonance that suggested high ceilings and carefully considered architecture. 7:58, Volkov observed. 2 minutes early. Good. "I try to be punctual, sir," Marcus replied, moving forward cautiously, unsure of the room's layout. "The piano is directly ahead of you, about 15 feet. There are no obstacles in your path." Marcus made his way forward until his cane touched the leg of what felt like a concert grand piano. "This is not a Steinway," he observed, running his hand along the curve of the instrument. "No, it's a Bosendorfer Imperial, the only one at Juilliard, and very few people are allowed to play it." Volkov's voice held a note of pride. "Sit. We have much to cover today." Marcus found the bench and settled himself, taking a moment to feel the keyboard. The Bosendorfer Imperial was legendary, a concert grand with 9 extra keys in the bass, creating a keyboard that extended beyond the standard 88 keys. The action was different too, heavier than a Steinway, requiring more strength but offering more control. "This is extraordinary," Marcus said softly, playing a gentle C major scale to feel the action of the keys. "It is the finest piano in this building, perhaps in this city," Volkov replied. "I had it brought here from Vienna 15 years ago, at considerable expense and inconvenience to the administration." As Marcus continued to explore the keyboard, he became aware of other details about the studio, The lack of ambient noise suggesting excellent soundproofing, the particular smell of lemon polish and old books, the way his movements created no echo, indicating sound-absorbing materials on the walls. "This is your private space," Marcus realized aloud, "not just a teaching studio." "Yes?" Volkov's voice came from further away now, as if he'd moved across the room. "I practice here, I compose here, and very occasionally I teach here." The significance of this wasn't lost on Marcus. Being invited into Volkov's personal creative space was a privilege few were likely to have experienced. "Now the Beethoven," Volkov said, returning to business. "Play the first movement, from the beginning." Marcus positioned his hands and began the dramatic opening of the Pathétique Sonata, the grave introduction with its powerful chords and pregnant pauses, followed by the agitated allegro theme. He lost himself in the music, in the emotional journey from darkness to passionate struggle that Beethoven had encoded in the notes. When he finished the movement, Volkov was silent for a long moment. Then, rather than offering a critique, he asked a question. "What do you hear in this music, Jefferson? Not what your teachers have told you it means, but what you, yourself, hear." Marcus considered carefully. "I hear someone facing something terrible, something powerful and overwhelming, but not surrendering to it, fighting against it, even when the fight seems impossible to win." Volkov's footsteps circled the piano slowly. "And do you know what Beethoven was facing when he wrote this sonata?" "The beginning of his hearing loss," Marcus replied. "The first signs of the deafness that would eventually be complete." "Yes." Volkov's voice softened slightly. "Imagine a musician losing the very sense that defines his art. It would be like a painter going blind." The words hung in the air between them, and Marcus wondered if the comparison was deliberate. Before he could respond, Volkov continued, "And yet he wrote this, and the late sonatas, the Ninth Symphony, the quartets, all after his deafness was total. The greatest works of his life, created in silence." Volkov's voice had taken on a quality Marcus hadn't heard before, something like reverence. "This is the true test of an artist, not what you create when everything is easy, but what you can wrest from the universe when it has turned against you." Marcus sat very still, absorbing Volkov's words, feeling their weight. It wasn't a standard music history lesson. It felt like Volkov was trying to convey something personal, something important. "Play it again," Volkov instructed. "But this time, don't just play the notes, play the struggle. Play what it means to create beauty in defiance of darkness." For the next 2 hours, they worked intensely on the sonata. Volkov was demanding as always, but there was a different quality to his teaching now, more collaborative, less dictatorial. He pushed Marcus hard, but with purpose, drawing out nuances in the music that Marcus hadn't consciously perceived before. "Your technique is solid," Volkov said as the lesson drew to a close. "But technique is just the beginning. What separates a good pianist from a great one is the ability to find the humanity in the notes, to make the listener feel what Beethoven felt, to bridge the centuries as if they were nothing." Marcus nodded, his fingers still resting on the keys. "That's what I want to do. Not just play the notes correctly, but make them speak." "Yes." Volkov's voice held a note of approval. "That is the proper ambition." He moved away from the piano, and Marcus heard the rustle of papers being gathered. "For Thursday, continue with the Beethoven, all 3 movements, and bring your composition as well. I have some further thoughts on its development." "Yes, sir," Marcus replied, collecting his things and preparing to leave. "One more thing, Jefferson." Volkov's voice stopped him. "How are you finding the apartment?" "It's very comfortable, thank you. And thank you for arranging the housing. It means a lot to me and my mother." Volkov made a dismissive sound. "It is a practical solution to a practical problem. Your talent is what matters, not whether your mother can drive you to school. There was another question Marcus wanted to ask, one that had been burning in his mind since Dr. Abernathy's call. "Sir, may I ask, why are you doing this? The special lessons, the housing, after what happened at the competition, I didn't expect—" "What happened at the competition was a mistake," Volkov interrupted. "I misjudged you. I do not often admit to being wrong, Jefferson, so enjoy this rare occurrence." Marcus smiled slightly. "I'm honored." "As you should be," Volkov replied, but there was a hint of humor in his voice. "Now go. I need to prepare for my next appointment." As Marcus made his way back through the hallways, his mind buzzed with everything that had just happened. Volkov had invited him into his private sanctuary, shared his personal thoughts on Beethoven's struggles, and even admitted to being wrong about Marcus. It was hard to reconcile this Volkov with the man who had publicly humiliated him just weeks ago. The rest of the day passed in a blur of classes and practice sessions. In his afternoon break, Marcus found May in the student lounge. "So?" she asked eagerly. "How was the private lesson in the inner sanctum? Did he make you sign a blood oath or sacrifice a small animal to the piano gods?" Marcus laughed. "Nothing that dramatic, but it was intense, different from our other lessons." "Different how?" "More personal somehow. He talked about Beethoven's deafness, about creating art despite obstacles." Marcus trailed off, not sure how to explain the subtle shift he'd sensed in Volkov's approach. "Huh." May sounded thoughtful. "That doesn't sound like the Volkov everyone else describes. Maybe he's been replaced by a pod person." "Or maybe there's more to him than people see," Marcus suggested. "Maybe," May conceded. "Or maybe you're special. Did you ever think of that? Maybe he sees something in you that makes him approach teaching differently." Marcus shrugged, uncomfortable with the suggestion. "I'm just a student like anyone else." "Yeah, right. A student who got Volkov to admit he was wrong. That's like getting the sun to rise in the west." Before Marcus could respond, his phone vibrated in his pocket. The text-to-speech function announced, "Call from Mother." "I should take this," he said to May. "Go ahead. We're still on for study group tonight, right? 7 o'clock in the 5th floor practice room?" "I'll be there," Marcus promised, then answered his phone. "Hi, Mom." "Just checking in," Diane said, her voice warm. "How was your first night? And the lesson with Volkov?" "Both good," Marcus replied, realizing it was true. Despite the strangeness of the new environment and the intensity of the lesson, he felt a growing sense of confidence. Different, but good. "Different can be good," Diane said, and Marcus could hear the smile in her voice. "I'm proud of you, you know, taking on all these new challenges." "Thanks, Mom. I'm just taking it one day at a time." After they hung up, Marcus headed to his next class, his mind still partly occupied with the morning's lesson. Volkov's words about Beethoven's struggle echoed in his thoughts. The comparison to a painter going blind hadn't been lost on him. Was Volkov suggesting a parallel between Beethoven's journey and his own? And if so, what did that mean for Marcus's future, both as a musician and as a young man, finding his way in a world that often defined people by what they lacked rather than what they possessed? These questions lingered as he moved through the rest of his day, a counterpoint to the music that was never far from his mind. The study group that evening proved to be more social than studious. While they began with genuine intentions to review music theory concepts, the conversation soon drifted to gossip about faculty members, stories of disastrous performances, and debates about the merits of various interpretations of standard repertoire. For Marcus, who had spent most of his musical education in isolation, working one-on-one with teachers or practicing alone, the camaraderie was as educational as any formal lesson. "Wait, so you've never heard Gould's 81 recording of the Goldberg Variations?" Elliot exclaimed when Marcus mentioned that he was working on Bach, That's musical sacrilege. My teacher thought his interpretations were too idiosyncratic, Marcus explained. She wanted me to develop my own approach without being influenced by his. That's like saying, don't look at Picasso. It might influence your painting, May argued. Here, I have it on my phone. Listen to this aria. She pressed play, and the room filled with the sound of Glenn Gould's piano, deliberate, contemplative, with a clarity that made each voice in the counterpoint distinct, yet part of an integrated whole. The tempo was much slower than most interpretations Marcus had heard, creating a meditative quality that transformed the familiar piece into something almost otherworldly. It's so different, Marcus said when the aria concluded, almost like he's having a private conversation with Bach. Exactly, Tyler chimed in. That's what makes Gould a genius. He doesn't just play the notes, he reimagines the entire conversation. Speaking of geniuses having conversations, Sophia said, what's the deal with you and Volkov? The rumor mill is working overtime. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. There's no deal. He's teaching me, that's all. In his private studio, Elliot pointed out, on his precious Bosendorfer that he doesn't let anyone touch. And he's paying for your housing, May added. That's not standard teacher-student stuff. How do you know about that? Marcus asked, surprised. I told you, news travels fast here, May replied. But seriously, it's weird. Volkov doesn't do charity. He's got to have some angle. Maybe he just sees potential in Marcus, Zhang suggested. Is that so hard to believe? In Volkov's world? Yes, Elliot said bluntly. The man's a musical genius, but he's also known for being completely self-absorbed. If he's taken a special interest in Marcus, it's because he thinks it benefits him somehow. Marcus absorbed their words in silence, turning them over in his mind. What was Volkov's angle? The question had been nagging at him for weeks. Maybe, Tyler suggested hesitantly, it's a PR move. You know, after the way he treated you at the competition. Maybe his agent told him to make amends publicly. That doesn't explain the private lessons, Sophia countered. If it was just about PR, he'd make a big show of mentoring Marcus in master classes, not hide him away in his private studio. As the others continued to debate Volkov's motivations, Marcus found himself withdrawing from the conversation. He didn't like being the subject of speculation and rumor. Whatever Volkov's reasons, the mentorship was giving him an opportunity to grow as a musician. Did the why really matter? Hey, May said softly, touching his arm. We're just curious, that's all. Whatever his reasons, you deserve the attention. Your playing is amazing. Marcus smiled in her direction. Thanks. I think I'm going to call it a night, though. Early class tomorrow. As he made his way back to the faculty apartment, Marcus couldn't shake the group's questions from his mind. What did Volkov want from him? Reputation, validation, some sort of redemption for his behavior at the competition, or was there something else, something deeper? The next morning brought a new routine, a college-level music analysis class that left Marcus's mind buzzing with new concepts and perspectives. The professor, Dr. Levinson, approached music with an almost mathematical precision, breaking down complex works into their component parts and showing how they functioned together. It was challenging, but exhilarating, like learning a new language that could unlock hidden meanings in the music Marcus had been playing for years. At lunchtime, he found a quiet corner in the cafeteria, only to be joined moments later by an unfamiliar voice. Mind if I sit here? The voice was male, with the slight hesitation of someone not sure how to approach a blind person. Go ahead, Marcus replied, gesturing to the chair across from him. I'm James Broderick, the young man said. I'm in the college program, piano performance. I saw you in Levinson's class this morning. You're Marcus Jefferson, right? That's right, Marcus confirmed, curious about where this was heading. Your comments about the Chopin Ballade were insightful, James said. Not many people pick up on the hidden voice in the development section. Thanks, Marcus replied, surprised by the compliment. It's easier to hear sometimes when you're not distracted by the visual element of the score. There was a slight pause. Then James asked, "Is it true you're studying privately with Volkov?" And there it was, the real reason for James's approach. Not interest in Marcus's musical insights, but curiosity about his connection to Volkov. "Yes," Marcus said simply, not elaborating. "That's quite an opportunity." James's voice held a note of what might have been envy or skepticism. "Volkov hasn't taken a private student in years, not since Alexei Petrovich." The name was unfamiliar to Marcus. "Who's Alexei Petrovich?" James made a sound of surprise. "You don't know? He was Volkov's last protege. A phenom from Moscow, brought to Juilliard 5 years ago on Volkov's personal recommendation. Full scholarship, special housing, private lessons, the works." The parallels to Marcus's own situation were unmistakable. "What happened to him?" "Nervous breakdown," James said bluntly. "Midway through a recital in his second year. Walked off stage in the middle of a Rachmaninoff concerto and never returned. Last I heard, he was back in Russia teaching at some small-town music school." He paused. "Volkov was brutal with him, pushed him relentlessly, criticized everything he did. Nothing was ever good enough." A chill ran down Marcus's spine. Was this his future? Was Volkov setting him up for a similar fall? "Why are you telling me this?" Marcus asked, his appetite suddenly gone. "Just thought you should know what you're getting into," James replied, his tone carefully neutral. "Volkov's methods aren't for everyone, but hey, maybe you're different. Maybe you can handle what Petrovich couldn't." After James left, Marcus sat alone, his thoughts turbulent. The story about Alexei Petrovich cast Volkov's interest in him in a troubling new light. Was Marcus just the latest in a line of students that Volkov would build up and then break? He was still mulling over these questions that afternoon when he arrived for his composition lesson. But as soon as he entered Volkov's private studio, the pianist sensed his distraction. "Your mind is elsewhere, Jefferson," Volkov observed after Marcus played through the latest version of his composition. "The notes are correct, but the music is missing." Marcus hesitated, then decided to be direct. "I heard about Alexei Petrovich today." A heavy silence fell over the studio. Marcus could hear Volkov's breathing change slightly, a small catch, quickly controlled. "Did you?" Volkov's voice was carefully neutral. "And what exactly did you hear?" "That he was your last private student, that he had a breakdown during a performance and quit music." "A simplification," Volkov said after a moment, "but not entirely inaccurate. They say you pushed him too hard. They say many things." Volkov's footsteps moved away from the piano, then back. "Alexei had enormous technical ability, perhaps the most natural facility I have ever seen, but he lacked something essential, the emotional resilience that great art demands." "And you think I have that?" Marcus asked. "You have already faced greater challenges than Alexei ever did," Volkov replied. "Losing your sight, adapting to a world not designed for you, continuing to pursue music despite obstacles that would defeat most people. These require a strength of character that cannot be taught." It was the most direct reference Volkov had ever made to Marcus's blindness, and it caught him off guard. Before he could respond, Volkov continued, "But that is not why we are here today. We are here to work on your composition, play from measure 47, where the secondary theme emerges." The lesson proceeded as usual, with Volkov offering precise, sometimes cutting critiques of Marcus's work, pushing him to refine and develop his musical ideas. But beneath the familiar dynamic, Marcus sensed a new undercurrent, a wariness on Volkov's part, as if the mention of Alexei Petrovich had opened a door the pianist preferred to keep closed. As the lesson concluded, Volkov made an unexpected announcement. "There is a faculty recital next Friday evening. I will be performing. You will attend." It wasn't a request. "Yes, sir," Marcus replied. "What will you be playing?" "Beethoven's Appassionata, Chopin's Fourth Ballade, and a piece of my own composition that has not been performed publicly before." Marcus couldn't hide his surprise. "You compose as well?" "Of course. Any musician worthy of the name should create, not merely interpret." Volkov's tone softened slightly. "I did not always make my compositions public. This will be the first performance of this particular work in 15 years. I'll look forward to hearing it," Marcus said sincerely. "Good. We will not meet next Thursday, as I will be preparing for the recital. Use the time to continue refining your piece. I expect significant progress by our next session." After Marcus left the studio, he made his way to the practice rooms, his mind swirling with new questions. The story of Alexei Petrovich troubled him, but Volkov's response had been unexpected. Was there genuine respect in the Russians' assessment of Marcus's resilience, or was it merely manipulation, a way to earn Marcus's trust before subjecting him to the same punishing regimen that had broken his previous student? He was so lost in thought that he nearly collided with someone in the hallway. "Whoa, careful there," came May's voice. "Deep in the musical zone?" "Something like that," Marcus replied, grateful for the friendly interruption. "Just finished a lesson with Volkov. And how was the maestro today? Still mysteriously interested in your development?" Marcus smiled wryly. "You could say that. He's invited me to his faculty recital next week." "Invited you, or commanded your attendance?" May asked, laughter in her voice. "Definitely commanded. He's premiering a new composition." "Volkov, composing?" May sounded surprised. "That's not something he's known for." "Apparently it's not new. He said it hasn't been performed in 15 years. "Curiouser and curiouser," May mused. "First he takes an unusual interest in you. Now he's reviving compositions from the vault. Maybe the two are connected somehow." "Maybe," Marcus agreed, a new possibility forming in his mind. "Listen, do you know anyone who might have information about Volkov's past? His career before Juilliard, his personal history, that kind of thing?" "Trying to solve the mystery?" May asked. "I don't know much, but Dr. Chen studied in Moscow around the same time Volkov was there. She might know something." "Why the sudden interest?" Marcus hesitated, then decided to confide in her. "Someone told me about Volkov's last private student, how he had a breakdown and quit music. I'm trying to understand if there's a pattern, or if I'm walking into the same situation." "Oh," May's voice grew serious. "That's a legitimate concern. Look, a few of us are going out for pizza tonight. Why don't you join us? Zhang's parents are friends with some Russian musicians. He might know something useful." That evening, over slices of pepperoni pizza in a crowded restaurant a few blocks from Juilliard, Marcus shared his concerns with the group. To his surprise, they took his questions seriously, offering information and speculation about Volkov's background. "My mom studied at the Moscow Conservatory in the 90s, Zhang explained. "She said Volkov was already a legend then, not just for his playing but for his intensity. There were rumors about his personal life, though she never knew if they were true." "What kind of rumors?" Marcus asked. "That he had a wife who was also a musician, a violinist, I think. But something happened, an accident or illness. No one talked about it openly." "Did she die?" Sophia asked. "I don't know," Zhang admitted. "But after whatever happened, Volkov changed, became more isolated, more demanding. The Volkov who came to America was already the cold, perfectionist figure we know." "When did he come to Juilliard?" Marcus asked. "About 15 years ago," Elliot supplied. It was a huge deal. He turned down offers from Curtis, Eastman, and several European conservatories to come here. 15 years. The same time frame as the composition Volkov was planning to premiere. Marcus felt a prickle of intuition, a sense that these pieces of information were connected somehow, though he couldn't yet see the pattern. "Thanks for sharing this," he said to the group. "It helps to know a bit more about his background." "Just be careful," Tyler advised. "Whatever happened in Volkov's past, he's still Volkov. If you feel like he's pushing you too hard or crossing boundaries, don't hesitate to step back." Marcus nodded, grateful for their concern. But as the conversation moved on to other topics, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was approaching a turning point, that the faculty recital would reveal something important not just about Volkov's music, but about the mysterious connection that seemed to be forming between them. Later that night, back in the faculty apartment, Marcus called his mother to share the events of the day. As always, Diane listened carefully, asking perceptive questions. "This Alexei Petrovich situation is concerning," she said when Marcus finished. "But I'm not sure it's the same thing. From what you've said, Volkov seems to be approaching your teaching differently." "Maybe," Marcus said, "but why? What makes me different?" Diane was quiet for a moment. "I don't know, honey, but I think you're right to be cautious, to try to understand his motivations. Just promise me you'll listen to your instincts. If something feels wrong, you'll tell me immediately." "I promise," Marcus assured her. After they hung up, he sat at the small keyboard in the apartment, playing softly, letting his fingers find their way through the evolving themes of his composition. The piece had changed significantly under Volkov's guidance, becoming more structured but also more personal, a musical expression of Marcus's journey through darkness toward light. As he played, he wondered, was that journey somehow mirroring Volkov's own? And if so, what darkness was the great pianist still trying to escape? The days leading up to Volkov's faculty recital passed in a blur of classes, practice sessions, and increasingly intense work on Marcus's composition. Without their regular Thursday lesson, Marcus found himself with unexpected free time, which he divided between focused practice and spending time with his new friends. Diane arrived Thursday evening to take Marcus home for the night, and he found himself oddly reluctant to leave the Juilliard environment, even temporarily. "You've adapted quickly," Diane observed as they drove toward Brooklyn. 3 weeks ago you were nervous about staying there without me. Now you seem more at home there than in our apartment." "It's not that," Marcus protested, though he knew there was some truth to her words. "It's just that everything I need for my music is there, the practice rooms, the pianos, the other students." "I get it," Diane said, her voice gentle. "It's your world now. That's how it should be." There was something in her tone that made Marcus turn toward her. "But," Diane sighed. "No but. I'm just adjusting to this new phase. My son, the independent conservatory student, too busy for his old mom." "Never too busy for you," Marcus said firmly, reaching across to squeeze her arm. "How are things at work? You haven't said much lately." "The usual," Diane replied, but Marcus detected a hesitation. "Actually, there's something I've been meaning to tell you. I've been offered a promotion, administrative director for the entire humanities division." "Mom, that's amazing," Marcus exclaimed. "Why didn't you say something sooner?" "Because it would mean longer hours, more responsibility. I was worried about how it would affect you, especially with your schedule at Juilliard. But now that I'm staying there most of the week, it's not an issue, right?" "That's what I've been thinking," Diane admitted. "The timing actually works out well. The salary increase would help with all the extra expenses, too." "Then you have to take it," Marcus insisted. "I'm fine, Mom. Better than fine. You've put your life on hold for me for years. It's time you did something for yourself." That night, as he lay in his childhood bed, surrounded by the familiar sounds and smells of home, Marcus reflected on how quickly his life had changed. Just months ago, he had been a talented but unknown student practicing in obscurity. Now he was studying with one of the world's greatest pianists, attending an elite conservatory, making friends with other serious musicians, and composing music that was evolving in ways he had never imagined. And his mother, who had dedicated herself to his care and education since his father's death, who had driven him to countless lessons and competitions, who had learned Braille alongside him so she could help with his studies, was finally getting a chance to advance her own career. It felt like everyone was moving forward, finding new paths. Yet beneath this sense of progress lurked questions that still troubled him. What did Volkov really want? Was Marcus being groomed for success or set up for failure? And why this strange interest in his development? Friday evening came all too quickly. The hall where Volkov would perform was already filling when Marcus arrived with Diane, who had taken the afternoon off to attend the recital with him. Marcus could sense the anticipation in the crowd, the hushed conversations, the rustling of programs, the subtle shift in energy that precedes an important cultural event. May found them in the lobby, greeting Diane warmly and offering to guide them to their seats. "Volkov arranged for you to sit in the center of the 5th row," she explained. "Apparently it's the acoustic sweet spot in this hall." "He specified where Marcus should sit?" Diane asked, sounding surprised. "Down to the exact seat number," May confirmed. "Like I said, the man's interest in your son is not normal, even for a dedicated teacher." As they settled into their seats, Marcus could hear familiar voices nearby, Zhang, Elliot, and the others from their growing circle of friends. Their presence was comforting, grounding him in the midst of his lingering anxiety about the evening ahead. A hush fell over the audience as the house lights dimmed. Footsteps crossed the stage, firm, measured, unmistakably Volkov's. There was applause, then silence as the pianist took his seat at the bench. Even without seeing him, Marcus could picture Volkov's ritual, the moment of stillness, hands hovering above the keys, the gathering of focus before the first note. The opening chords of Beethoven's Appassionata Sonata filled the hall, dramatic, questioning, immediate in their emotional impact. From the first notes, Marcus could tell that Volkov was in rare form. There was an intensity to his playing that transcended mere technical brilliance, a quality that seemed to charge the very air in the hall. As the sonata progressed through its movements, from the turbulent first movement through the serene variations of the second and into the relentless final movement, Marcus found himself completely absorbed in Volkov's interpretation. The Russian played Beethoven not as a historical figure, but as a living presence, his struggles and triumphs rendered immediate and visceral through Volkov's commanding technique and profound emotional intelligence. When the final chords of the sonata resounded through the hall, there was a moment of stunned silence before the audience erupted in applause. Marcus joined in, genuinely moved by what he had heard. "That was?" Diane whispered beside him, seemingly at a loss for words. "I know," Marcus replied. He did know, knew that they had just witnessed something extraordinary, a performance that went beyond mere notes to touch something essential about the human experience. After a brief intermission, Volkov returned to perform Chopin's 4th Ballade. Again, his playing was revelatory, the complex emotions of the piece rendered with both clarity and mystery, the technical challenges overcome with such ease that they became invisible, leaving only the pure expression of the music. But it was the final piece on the program, Volkov's own composition, that Marcus had been waiting for. As the pianist returned to the stage after another round of enthusiastic applause, a tension seemed to build in the hall, a collective anticipation for this rare creative revelation from a musician known primarily as an interpreter. Volkov took his seat at the piano but didn't begin playing immediately. Instead, he did something unusual. He addressed the audience directly. "The final piece this evening is my own composition," he said, his accented voice carrying clearly through the hall. "It is called Elegy for Clara. I wrote it 15 years ago after a personal loss. I have performed it publicly only once before." There was a pause, and Marcus sensed that Volkov was gathering himself. "Tonight I play it again with new understanding." The piece began with a simple, haunting melody in the upper register of the piano, a theme of such pure sadness that Marcus felt his throat tighten in response. As the composition developed, this theme was transformed, appearing in different registers, harmonized in varying ways, sometimes obscured by dissonance, sometimes emerging with crystalline clarity. The middle section grew turbulent, with cross rhythms and harmonic tensions creating a sense of struggle, of rage against loss. Then, gradually, the music evolved toward a kind of acceptance. Not happiness, but a hard-won peace that acknowledged pain without being consumed by it. Throughout the piece, Marcus was struck by an odd sense of familiarity. There was something in the harmonic language, in the way the themes developed, that reminded him of his own composition. The realization sent a chill down his spine. The similarities weren't obvious. Volkov's piece was far more sophisticated, more developed, but the underlying sensibility, the emotional journey from darkness toward light, echoed Marcus's own musical explorations in uncanny ways. When the final notes faded, there was none of the immediate applause that had followed the earlier pieces. Instead, a profound silence held the hall, as if no one wanted to break the spell that Volkov had cast. Marcus could hear quiet sniffling from various directions. The piece had moved many in the audience to tears. Finally, someone began to clap, and others joined in, building to sustained applause as Volkov stood to acknowledge the response. He took several bows, then left the stage, only to return for an encore after the audience's ovation refused to die down. For his encore, Volkov chose a piece Marcus recognized immediately, Bach's Jesu, Joy of Man's Desiring, arranged for piano. It was a stark contrast to the emotional intensity of the elegy, pure, serene, offering comfort rather than confronting pain. The melody unfurled like a ribbon of light, Volkov's touch so delicate that the notes seemed to float in the air. As the evening concluded and the audience began to disperse, Diane turned to Marcus. "That was extraordinary," she said. "Especially his own composition. I've never heard anything quite like it." "It reminded me of my piece," Marcus said quietly. "The one I've been working on with him. There were similarities in the way he developed the themes in the emotional arc." "Really?" Diane sounded surprised. "That's interesting." Before Marcus could respond, he heard someone approaching their seats. "Marcus Jefferson?" It was a woman's voice, unfamiliar, with a slight accent he couldn't place. "Yes?" Marcus replied, turning toward the voice. "Mr. Volkov asked me to bring you backstage after the performance. Your mother is welcome as well." Diane's hand tightened on Marcus's arm. "Who are you?" she asked, her protective instincts evident in her tone. "Forgive me. I'm Elena Petrovna, Mr. Volkov's assistant." He was most insistent that Marcus should come backstage. Marcus felt a flutter of anticipation. "We'd be happy to come," he said, standing and taking his mother's arm. As they followed Elena through the corridors behind the concert hall, Marcus's mind raced with questions. Why did Volkov want to see him immediately after such an emotionally demanding performance? What was the significance of the elegy for Clara? And why had it sounded so strangely familiar? They were led to a small, quiet room that smelled of flowers, presumably bouquets from admirers. Marcus could hear Volkov's breathing before the pianist spoke, recognizing its particular rhythm. "Jefferson," Volkov acknowledged. "Mrs. Jefferson, thank you for coming. It was a remarkable performance, Marcus said sincerely. Your composition especially, it was deeply moving. You found it so? There was a note in Volkov's voice that Marcus had never heard before, a vulnerability perhaps, or a particular kind of tension. Yes. There was something in it that reminded me of my own piece, the one we've been working on together. Volkov was silent for a long moment then. Not a coincidence, perhaps, but that is a conversation for another time. His voice shifted, becoming more businesslike. I have a proposition for you, Jefferson. Next month, I am giving a series of masterclasses in Boston. I would like you to accompany me and perform your composition as part of the program. Marcus was stunned. You want me to perform my piece? In Boston? At the New England Conservatory. Yes, it is nearly complete, is it not? With another 2 weeks of work, it should be ready for public performance. Yes, I suppose so, Marcus stammered, caught off guard by the unexpected offer. Good. Elena will arrange the details with your mother. Volkov's tone left no room for refusal or negotiation. It was decided. After exchanging a few more pleasantries, they were ushered out, Volkov claiming fatigue after the emotional demands of the performance. As they walked back toward the main lobby, Diane whispered to Marcus, "What just happened?" "I'm not sure," Marcus replied honestly. "But I think we're about to find out more about why Volkov has taken such an interest in me." Back in the lobby, they found May and the others waiting for them, eager to hear about their backstage encounter. "Well," May demanded, "what did the maestro want?" "He's invited Marcus to perform his own composition at master classes in Boston next month," Diane explained, still sounding slightly dazed. There was a collective intake of breath from the group. "That's unheard of," Elliot said finally. "Volkov doesn't showcase students that way, especially not their compositions." "Unless they're Alexei Petrovich," a new voice interjected. It was James Broderick, the college student who had told Marcus about Volkov's previous protege. "What do you mean?" Marcus asked. "Petrovich was the last student whose composition Volkov promoted publicly," James explained, right before his breakdown. A chill settled over the group. May broke the silence, her voice deliberately light. "Well, history isn't destiny. Marcus isn't Alexei. This could be an amazing opportunity." "It is," Marcus agreed, pushing aside the flicker of unease, "and I intend to make the most of it." But as they said their goodbyes and headed for the parking lot, a question lingered in Marcus's mind. Who was Clara, and what was her connection to the music that had so strangely echoed his own? The name Clara haunted Marcus throughout the weekend at home. By Sunday afternoon, he couldn't contain his curiosity any longer. He sat at the kitchen table with his laptop, the screen reader activated, searching for any connection between Nikolai Volkov and someone named Clara. "Still playing detective?" Diane asked as she prepared lunch. "I can't shake the feeling that understanding who Clara was might help me understand why Volkov is so interested in me," Marcus replied, frustration evident in his voice. "But there's nothing specific in any of these articles. Just mentions of his career trajectory, his recordings, his reputation as a perfectionist. Maybe it's something more personal," Diane suggested. "Something that wouldn't make it into professional articles." "Like what?" "I don't know. A family member, perhaps. You said Zhang mentioned Volkov had a wife who was a musician." Marcus sat up straighter. "That's it. Zhang said she was a violinist." His fingers moved quickly over the keyboard, typing a new search query. "Nikolai Volkov, wife violinist Clara." The screen reader began to process the results. Clara Volkov, née Simmons, American violinist, died 2010, wife of pianist Nikolai Volkov, rising star in the classical music world before her death at age 32. "Mom," Marcus called, his heart racing. "I found her." Diane came to sit beside him, and together they pieced together Clara Volkov's story from various articles and obituaries. She had been a promising violinist, educated at Juilliard, who met Nikolai Volkov during a music festival in Switzerland when she was 25, and he was already an established star at 38. Their marriage had surprised the classical music world, not just because of the age difference, but because Volkov had been known as a confirmed bachelor, devoted exclusively to his art. "Listen to this," Marcus said, navigating to another article. Clara Volkov was known for her interpretive sensitivity and unusual approach to standard repertoire. Critics noted her ability to find new emotional depths in familiar works. He paused. "That sounds like what Volkov said about my playing." "There's more," Diane said, reading ahead on the screen. "She was also a composer, though few of her works were published during her lifetime." Marcus felt a chill run through him. A composer? They found a short profile piece from 2008, 2 years before her death, describing how Clara balanced her performing career with teaching talented young musicians from disadvantaged backgrounds. "She believed music should be accessible to everyone," Diane read aloud. "Clara often spoke about how music transcends physical limitations and speaks directly to the human spirit." Physical limitations. The phrase echoed in Marcus's mind, connecting to Volkov's words about Beethoven's deafness, about creating art despite obstacles. "How did she die?" Marcus asked quietly. Diane continued reading. "It doesn't say specifically in this article, just that she passed away after a long illness." She scrolled further. "Here's something. A memorial scholarship was established in her name at Juilliard, specifically for students who've overcome significant challenges." The pieces were beginning to align in Marcus's mind, forming a picture that both intrigued and unsettled him. "She died 15 years ago," he said slowly. "The same year Volkov composed Elegy for Clara, the same year he came to teach at Juilliard." "And now he's taking a special interest in you," Diane added, "a talented young musician who's overcome significant challenges." "He sees her in me somehow," Marcus whispered, "or what I represent, a musician finding ways to create despite limitations." Diane was quiet for a moment. "The question is, does that matter? Is his interest in you genuine, or is it just about his own unresolved grief?" Marcus had no answer. The discovery of Clara's identity had only deepened the mystery of Volkov's motivations. Was Marcus simply a surrogate for the students Clara would have taught? A project Volkov had taken on to honor his late wife's memory? Or was there something more personal, more complex at work? These questions followed him back to Juilliard that evening, where his friends were eager to hear about his weekend discoveries. "Clara Volkov," May repeated, when Marcus shared what he'd learned. They were gathered in his faculty apartment, pizza boxes scattered across the small coffee table. "That actually explains a lot." "Like what?" Marcus asked. "Well, if he lost his wife to illness 15 years ago, it might explain why he turned into such a cold, demanding person," Tyler suggested. "Grief can change people." "But why the special interest in Marcus?" Sophia wondered. "No offense, but there are other students at Juilliard who've overcome challenges." "Maybe it's the combination," Zhang said thoughtfully. "The blindness plus the extraordinary talent. Maybe it reminds him of Clara's belief that music transcends physical limitations. Or maybe he sees Marcus as the kind of student Clara would have championed," Elliot added. "A way of continuing her work." Marcus absorbed their theories in silence. None of them felt completely right, yet each contained pieces of what might be the truth. "Whatever his reasons," May said firmly, "the fact remains that he's offering you an incredible opportunity. The Boston masterclasses are a big deal. People will remember your name after this." "If I don't mess it up," Marcus replied, anxiety creeping into his voice. "You won't," May assured him. "Your composition is beautiful, and we're all going to help you prepare." True to her word, over the next 2 weeks, May organized practice sessions where Marcus could perform his piece for their small group, receiving feedback and building confidence. The composition evolved with each iteration, gaining clarity and emotional impact under Volkov's continued guidance during their private lessons. Volkov himself seemed different now, still demanding, still critical when necessary, but with a new undertone of what? Not exactly warmth, but perhaps a kind of investment that went beyond mere professional obligation. He spoke more freely about interpretive choices, about the philosophy behind certain musical decisions, about finding one's authentic voice as an artist. A composition is never truly finished, he told Marcus during their final lesson before Boston. It lives and breathes with each performance, each interpretation. What you play in Boston will be the piece as it exists in that moment. Later it may become something else, something more. Like your elegy for Clara? Marcus asked, seizing the opportunity to broach the subject directly. Volkov was silent for a long moment. Yes, he said finally, like the elegy. I found out who she was, Marcus said quietly. Your wife. Another silence, this one heavier. I suspected you might. Volkov's footsteps moved away from the piano, then back. And what conclusion have you drawn from this discovery? I'm not sure, Marcus admitted. I understand that she believed in making music accessible to everyone, in how it transcends limitations. I understand that losing her must have been devastating. He hesitated, then asked directly, Is that why you're interested in teaching me? Because of what she believed? Volkov made a sound that might have been a short, humorless laugh. You think I am honoring her memory through you? A noble interpretation, but incomplete. His voice shifted, becoming more distant, as if he were speaking partly to himself. There is more to this story, Jefferson, more than you have discovered through your internet searches. But now is not the time. After Boston, perhaps. And with that cryptic statement, he ended the lesson, leaving Marcus with even more questions than before. The day of departure for Boston arrived with a flurry of last-minute preparations. Diane had taken time off work to accompany Marcus, her presence a steadying force amid his growing nervousness about the performance. You're ready for this, she assured him as they boarded the train, Volkov already seated several rows ahead. Your piece is extraordinary, and no matter what Volkov's motivations might be, this is your moment. Marcus nodded, drawing strength from her confidence. I just can't help feeling there's still something I'm missing. Something about Volkov, about Clara, about why all of this is happening. Maybe, Diane conceded. But does it matter? Your talent is real. Your hard work is real. Whatever Volkov's reasons, he recognized something genuine in you. The journey passed in a blur of anticipation and last-minute mental practice. Marcus ran through his composition in his mind, hearing each note, each harmony, visualizing his fingers on the keys. The piece had evolved significantly under Volkov's guidance, becoming more structured but also more personal, a musical narrative of finding beauty and meaning in darkness. Upon arrival in Boston, they were whisked to the New England Conservatory, where Volkov would be giving a series of master classes over 2 days. Marcus's performance was scheduled for the afternoon of the second day, the culmination of the event. The first day's classes were fascinating. Marcus sat in the audience listening as Volkov worked with advanced students from the conservatory. His teaching style was consistent with what Marcus had experienced privately, demanding, occasionally cutting, but also insightful, pushing each student toward a deeper understanding of the music and their own capabilities. That evening, at dinner in the hotel restaurant, Volkov surprised Marcus by inviting him and Diane to join his table. It was the first time they had dined together, and Marcus was struck by how different Volkov seemed in this setting, more relaxed, almost conversational. Boston was Clara's hometown, Volkov said unexpectedly as they waited for their meals. She gave her first public recital in this city at age 12. Marcus exchanged a glance with his mother, surprised by this voluntary mention of Clara. "Did she attend the conservatory here?" he asked carefully. "No. She went directly to Juilliard at 17, but she always maintained a connection to Boston." Volkov's voice softened slightly. "She would have appreciated your performance tomorrow. She had a particular interest in young composers finding their voice." "She composed as well, didn't she?" Marcus ventured. "Yes, though few of her works were published." There was a pause, then Volkov added, "Her illness made it difficult toward the end." Diane spoke for the first time. "May I ask what illness she had? The articles we found weren't specific." A tension entered Volkov's voice. "Retinitis pigmentosa, a degenerative eye disease. She was gradually losing her sight over the years I knew her. By the time she died, she was nearly blind." The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. Clara had been going blind, just like him. Suddenly, Volkov's interest, his recognition of Marcus's talent, his comparisons to Beethoven's deafness, it all took on a new, more personal dimension. "I didn't know," Marcus said quietly. "Few people did," Volkov replied. "She did not want to be defined by her condition. She wanted her music, her playing, to speak for itself." He cleared his throat. "Much like you, Jefferson." The rest of the dinner passed in strained conversation about the next day's schedule. Marcus's mind was racing, processing this new information and its implications. Clara Volkov hadn't just been a musician who believed in overcoming limitations in the abstract. She had been living that philosophy, adapting to progressive vision loss while continuing to create and perform music. And Volkov had watched her struggle, had seen her courage, had perhaps been changed by it. Had that experience opened him to recognizing something in Marcus that others might have missed? Or was there something more complex, more troubling at work? That night, in his hotel room, Marcus called May to share what he had learned. Wow, she said when he finished. "So you think Volkov sees Clara in you somehow, because of the blindness?" "Maybe," Marcus replied. "Or maybe he sees something Clara could have become if she'd lived. I don't know. He said there's more to the story, something I haven't discovered yet. Are you going to ask him about it?" "He said we'd talk after Boston. I think I need to focus on the performance first." Marcus sighed, suddenly feeling the weight of all these complications. "Sometimes I wish this was just about the music, you know, not all this history and psychology." "I get that," May said sympathetically. "But music is never just about notes on a page, is it? It's about people, emotions, connections. Maybe that's what your piece is really about, finding those connections even in darkness." Her words stayed with Marcus as he drifted off to sleep, his dreams filled with music, Clara's, Volkov's, his own, intertwining, conversing across time and space, creating patterns of meaning he could feel but not yet fully understand. The morning of Marcus's performance dawned clear and crisp, a perfect autumn day in Boston. He woke early, his mind already churning with a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. Today he would play his composition for an audience of conservatory students, faculty, and guests, many of them accomplished musicians themselves, all of them drawn by Volkov's reputation. Diane joined him for breakfast in the hotel restaurant, her calm presence helping to steady his nerves. Volkov was nowhere to be seen. He had his own pre-performance rituals, no doubt. "Whatever happens today," Diane said as they finished their meal, "remember why you make music. Not for Volkov, not for an audience, but for yourself. For the joy it brings you, for the way it lets you express what words cannot." Marcus nodded, grateful for the reminder. In all the complexities of the past weeks, the questions about Volkov's motives, the discoveries about Clara, the pressure of the upcoming performance, he had sometimes lost sight of that simple truth. He played because he loved it, because it completed him in some essential way. "Thanks, Mom," he said, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. "For everything. I wouldn't be here without you." Diane laughed softly. "Oh, I think you would. Maybe not by this exact path, but your talent and determination would have found a way. They always do." The New England Conservatory's Burns Hall was already half full when they arrived for the afternoon session. Marcus could hear the murmur of conversations, the rustle of programs, the occasional burst of laughter. He waited backstage, running through mental exercises to calm his racing heart. Volkov found him there, his footsteps unmistakable as they approached. "Jefferson," he acknowledged. "Are you prepared?" "Yes, sir," Marcus replied, straightening his shoulders. "Good. I will introduce you shortly." Volkov paused, then added, "Your piece, it has a title now, yes?" Marcus nodded. "I'm calling it Emergent Light." Volkov seemed to consider this. "Appropriate. Remember what we discussed about the transition into the final section? Give the audience time to absorb the change. Don't rush." "I won't," Marcus promised. Volkov hesitated as if he wanted to say something more, but then simply walked away, his footsteps receding toward the stage. A moment later, Marcus heard his voice addressing the audience, the slight accent more pronounced in the hall's acoustics. "For the final portion of our masterclass series, I am presenting a young composer-pianist whose work deserves your attention. Marcus Jefferson is a scholarship student at Juilliard's pre-college program. The piece he will perform today is his own composition, developed over the past several months. It represents not only considerable technical skill, but also a maturity of expression rarely found in a musician his age." There was a pause. Then Volkov added something that caught Marcus by surprise. "I believe this composition stands on its own merits and should be judged solely on its musical qualities, not on the personal circumstances of its creator. That said, those of you who have attended my lectures on Beethoven will appreciate that great art often emerges from confronting and transcending life's challenges." A staff member appeared at Marcus's side, ready to guide him to the stage. As he walked out, cane in hand, he heard a subtle shift in the audience's energy, whispers, a few gasps, as people realized he was blind. But he pushed that awareness aside, focusing instead on finding the piano bench, orienting himself to the instrument. The Steinway under his fingers felt responsive, well-maintained. He took a moment to adjust the bench, to center himself. Then, with a deep breath, he began to play. The opening theme emerged softly, almost tentatively, a questioning melody that spoke of uncertainty, of searching in darkness. As he developed this theme, adding harmonies that shifted between dissonance and resolution, Marcus felt himself becoming fully absorbed in the music, the audience fading from his awareness. The middle section grew more complex, with cross rhythms and counterpoint, creating a sense of struggle, of obstacles confronted. This was the heart of the piece, the musical representation of his own journey, not just with blindness, but with all the challenges of finding his voice as an artist. He played with complete conviction, his technique serving the emotional truth he was trying to convey. And then came the transition Volkov had mentioned, the moment when the music began to change, darkness giving way to the first hints of light. Marcus took his time here, letting the harmonic resolution emerge gradually, organically. The final section bloomed with a transformed version of the opening theme, now imbued with warmth and clarity, still acknowledging the shadows, but no longer defined by them. As the final notes resonated through the hall, Marcus kept his hands on the keys, holding the moment, feeling the resonance not just of the piano, but of his own journey through the piece. When he finally lifted his hands, there was a beat of complete silence, then the applause began, tentative at first, then building into sustained, enthusiastic approval. Someone shouted, "Bravo!" from the back of the hall. Marcus stood, bowing toward the sound of the applause, a smile spreading across his face. As he made his way backstage, guided by the same staff member, he was overwhelmed by a sense of completion, not just of the performance, but of something larger, something that had been building since that first difficult encounter with Volkov at the competition. He had proven himself, not just to the audience or to Volkov, but to himself. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of congratulations and conversations. Music students approached him asking about his compositional process, his influences, his future plans. Faculty members offered encouragement and, in some cases, their contact information for future opportunities. Through it all, Marcus felt a new confidence, a solid ground beneath his feet that hadn't been there before. Volkov remained distant, acknowledging Marcus's performance with a brief nod when their paths crossed, but offering no detailed critique or praise. It wasn't until that evening, after a celebratory dinner with Diane, that the Russian pianist finally approached them in the hotel lobby. "Jefferson," he said, "a word before you depart tomorrow, in private." "Of course," Marcus agreed. "Where and when?" "The Hotel Garden, 9 a.m. With that, Volkov walked away, leaving Marcus and Diane exchanging puzzled glances. "The mysterious final chapter," Diane said with a small sigh. "At least we'll finally get some answers." The Hotel Garden was quiet the next morning, the early autumn air crisp and invigorating. Marcus found his way to a bench near a small fountain, the sound of water helping him orient himself in the space. He didn't have to wait long before he heard Volkov's approach. "Your performance yesterday was successful," Volkov said without preamble as he sat beside Marcus. "The audience was genuinely moved, not merely impressed by your technical facility." "Thank you," Marcus replied, recognizing that from Volkov, this was high praise indeed. "You have been wondering about my interest in you," Volkov continued, his tone matter-of-fact. "About Clara, and what connection she might have to our current situation." "Yes," Marcus admitted, "especially after learning about her vision loss." Volkov was quiet for a moment, the only sound the gentle splashing of the fountain. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, softened by memory. "Clara began losing her sight in the second year of our marriage. The progression was slow at first, then accelerated. The doctors offered treatments, surgeries, but they only delayed the inevitable." He paused. As a violinist, as a composer, her vision was essential to her work, or so we thought. "But she adapted," Marcus said, "found new ways to create music." "Yes, she was remarkable in that way, determined not to let her condition define her art." Another pause. "Before she died, not from the retinitis, but from an unrelated illness, she was working on a composition, a piece for piano that expressed her journey through darkness toward an uncertain light." Marcus's breath caught. "Like my piece." "Similar in concept, yes. She left it unfinished, just sketches, themes, ideas." Volkov's voice had grown distant, as if he were seeing something far away. "For years I could not look at those sketches. The pain was too fresh. But when I heard your original composition at the competition, something resonated. There was an echo of Clara's sensibility in your music, not the notes themselves, but the underlying emotional truth." "Is that why you were cruel to me at first?" Marcus asked, the question that had lingered for months finally finding voice. "Because it reminded you of what you'd lost?" Volkov sighed, a heavy sound laden with regret. "Partly, yes. It was uncomfortable to encounter that connection unexpectedly. But also, I was testing you." "Testing me?" "To see if you had what Clara had, not just talent, but resilience. The strength to withstand criticism, rejection, obstacles. Great artists must have this quality. Clara understood it. I needed to know if you did as well." Marcus absorbed this, a complex mixture of emotions washing through him. And the housing, the special lessons, were those part of the test too? No, Volkov admitted. Those came after I recognized my error. After I saw that you possessed not just Clara's resilience, but your own unique voice. He shifted on the bench. There is one more thing you should know, Jefferson. Something I have told no one until now. Marcus waited, sensing the weight of what was to come. Clara's unfinished composition. I completed it. That was the elegy for Clara I performed at Juilliard, but it was not wholly my creation. The core themes, the emotional architecture, those were hers. I merely gave them form, found a way to complete what she had begun. The revelation hung in the air between them. Marcus didn't know what to say, how to respond to this unexpected confidence. I have spent 15 years trying to honor her legacy, Volkov continued after a moment, establishing scholarships in her name, championing students who reminded me of her approach to music. But with you, he hesitated. With you, I saw a chance to do more, to help shape an artist who might carry forward not just her resilience, but her creative spirit. I'm not Clara, Marcus said quietly, feeling the need to establish this boundary. I can't be a replacement for what you lost. No, you are not, Volkov agreed, his tone sharpening slightly. You are your own musician with your own journey. That became clear to me as we worked together on your composition. What began as nostalgia perhaps evolved into genuine respect for your distinct voice. Marcus nodded, feeling a weight lifting from him. Whatever Volkov's initial motivations had been, what mattered now was the respect that had developed between them as artists, as teacher and student. So where do we go from here? He asked. Forward, Volkov replied simply. You have talent, Jefferson, real talent, but you also have much to learn, much to develop. I would like to continue our work together, if you are willing. I am, Marcus said without hesitation, but as myself, not as a connection to Clara. As yourself, Volkov agreed, though I hope you will forgive an old man's occasional remembrances. Clara would have liked you, I think, not because of your similarities, but because of your differences, your unique approach to sound, to form. They sat in companionable silence for a few minutes, the morning sun warming their faces. Marcus felt a sense of peace settle over him, a clarity about both the past and the future. The mystery of Volkov's interest had been solved, the tension between them resolved into something more honest, more productive. One more thing, Volkov said as they prepared to leave the garden. Your piece, Emergent Light, it deserves a wider audience. There is a chamber music series at Carnegie Hall in the spring. I would like you to perform it there as part of my program. Marcus caught his breath. Carnegie Hall as part of your program? Is that acceptable? Volkov asked, a hint of his old imperious tone returning. Marcus laughed, the sound bright and genuine. Yes, sir. Very acceptable. As they walked back toward the hotel, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought him to this moment. From the terrified boy standing alone on the Carnegie Hall stage, mocked by the famous pianist, to a young composer preparing to share his music with the world, it had been a path of challenges, discoveries, and unexpected connections. He thought of his mother's unwavering support, of May and his new friends, of the music that had been his constant companion through darkness and light, and he thought of Volkov, complicated, difficult, but ultimately a true teacher who had helped him find his voice. Whatever came next, Carnegie Hall, Juilliard, a future he was only beginning to imagine, Marcus knew one thing with certainty. The music would guide him, just as it always had, not as a way to escape his blindness, but as a way to transform it into something powerful, something beautiful, something that could speak to others traveling through their own darkness, helping them find their way toward light. And in that knowledge, he found not just acceptance, but joy.